Test. Okay. And we are. So, hello to everybody out there. Let's see. While I wait for people, let's talk about something. So I just posted a lesson which you will not be able to see yet at this time because it's only available on Patreon temporarily. But that lesson is about 19 commonly mispronounced common English words. And by the time you watch this replay, if you watch the replay, you will be able to watch that video. So go check it out. But anyway, I see we have a couple people here. So hello. Welcome to the stream. Feel free to say hi. Open for questions as always. Other than that, let's see. I had a pretty good week, I think, so far. It's Thursday. I think. Yeah, today's Thursday. Hello. No, I just started like 1 minute ago. I started a minute early today. So, how's it going? Glad to see you at this live stream since you missed the last one. I don't know if you saw the new video I posted on Patreon, but I don't know if you'll get much out of that video because you're quite advanced, but maybe. Any questions today? We need more people. Just like bring all the people. I should probably go on Twitter, make an announcement. But while we're waiting for questions and people, great, I'm doing okay. Thank you for asking. I haven't seen the video, but I'll check it out ASAP. Yes. So, good. Yeah, it's I really like how the video came out. I kind of did it a little bit differently than most videos. I'm a little more animated and I don't want to say crazy, it's a bit strong, but I try I try to make some jokes and I messed with like the zoom in and the zoom out and try to make it more engaging. And towards the end you get to hear me speaking a little bit of a British accent. I don't know. I think I like how certain parts of it came out. So but it's a long one. It's like 20 minutes. So there's that. Let me see here. I want to give the live stream link, which of course YouTube doesn't make easy for me. Okay. And get link. Twitter. Live now. Oops. Now. Hashtag learn English. Okay, anyway. Sounds fun. I'm here for more animated Josh, although I love your usual approach as well. Yeah. Yeah, at the end of that video, I because it was a little bit different, I'm always trying to keep in mind, that I want the material to be as accessible as possible to like the lowest level possible without it being too slow and clearly pronounced and all that stuff. And I think I do a pretty good job of that for the most part. But that also means like I tend not to, make certain puns or jokes or, be sort of like I normally would be, like kind of in the live streams here. And I kind of let some of that come through. And towards the end, I threw out that question. I was like, do you guys like this? It seems kind of unprofessional. Or would you like for me to be more, proper and all that? And that's why I went into the British accent. So Anyway, I don't know. It's a weird week. That video took me over 10 hours to edit. Finally finished it earlier today. Ugh. So I need an editor. Well, I need money to pay an editor, really. That's the main problem. Especially since they'll be able to do it a lot faster than me. Okay. Mr. Kapoor, I don't know. I still haven't figured out if the number of people it tells me are here, which currently says 2. I haven't been able to figure out if one of those is me. Because there's like always one, I think. So there's you and maybe somebody else, but I'm sure Sita and Twit have said hi already. He's been sending me some recordings on Patreon for the second vowel, and he's doing very well. He's making some improvement with my feedback. He doesn't quite have it the last time I checked, but like he had it and then he practiced a little bit and he lost it. So that happens. He's doing very, very well with that. But yeah. Anyway, I don't know if you heard the news. If you saw on Patreon, because I don't know how often you check Patreon, but on Patreon and Facebook, I mentioned that anybody who wants to give me recordings of a few sentences, I can take that material, put it into a video where I analyze it, and then publish that for everybody to see, so everybody can benefit from it. Because I think that is a really good way to do it. Because instead of just analyzing like native speech, which is very useful and good, analyzing learner speech, a lot, you guys, not everybody of course, but a lot of people from different languages have a lot of the same problems. So and then if you don't have a problem, well, good job, you don't have a problem. But I think it would be a useful little like series to do. I got some recordings from Cedent that I'm going to be using, so we'll see. I have too many videos I'm trying to do. Like, I have 1,000,001 ideas, and it's like every week I want to do at least like 5 videos, and I get maybe like 1 or 2 done. So that sounds great. I just happen to hate my voice a little. Yeah, I know, me too. Apparently, everybody loves my voice. I don't know why, because I get that comment all the time on YouTube and TikTok, but I hate my voice. So it doesn't help after smoking for several years, because that actually I have 2 reasons why my voice is artificially not as good as it should be, but I've always hated it. Smoking for several years strained my voice a bit. But also, here's a fun story. Super short story, but fun story. So I could still do it, but if I do it, I'm probably going to completely lose my voice. I made a bet in high school because in 12th grade, I spent a lot of times hanging out with 3 girls. I had guy friends, but I don't know. I often used to hang out with girls and stuff because I don't know. I was just comfortable. And so we would all hang out after school and everything. And I don't remember if I made the bet or if one of them bet me. And I don't remember how we even came upon this, but basically the bet was made that I could scream louder than the 3 of them combined. And I won. So, yeah, unfortunately, because I wasn't particularly self-aware when I was younger. Hello, how are you? Thanks for joining the chat. I have no idea how to pronounce your name because I can't read what I assume to be Arabic or something based off of Arabic. But welcome to the chat, the live stream. Feel free to ask any questions. But anyway, yeah, kind of threw out part of my voice, which I regret. But it's okay. That's okay. Here we are now. I can still talk. So we have 4 people. Yay, we're moving up in the world. 4 whole individual human beings are watching me sit in my chair, tell pointless stories. What do you mean, in my opinion? Are you drinking pop? I don't think any American under the age of 50 says pop. Could be wrong. It might be a regional thing. I say soda, but yes, I am. I love your pointless. Well, good. At least somebody does. So okay. You say, what do you mean? You mean like I think the phrase you want is what does blank mean? If you say, what do you mean, and then something, that means that I said it, and you're questioning why I said that thing. So that's the structure I believe you want there. What does blank mean? So what does, in my opinion, mean? So I'm not sure why we have in my opinion, with the parentheses and 3 ins. Can you clarify that? I think you're asking, what does, in my opinion, mean? Opinion. That? Is that what you're asking? And don't feel embarrassed if I don't understand or anything. We're here to learn English. So if I don't understand, it could be me. That happens sometimes. But mistakes are part of the process. That's how we learn. Also, let me know if I'm speaking too fast for you. I try to be mindful of that. Ooh, we're at 5 people. Yay. Let's hope it keeps rising. I want to break the record. I think the most I've ever had is like, I don't even know, like 9 or 10 at one time or something. But we have 5 people here. Good. Now we have 4. Oh, somebody left. They just had to ruin it. That's okay. Meanwhile, I was wondering, what are some of the most common problem areas people you've worked with have had? Oh, that's different structure. Very nicely done. I was wondering, what are the most common problem areas people you've worked with have had as far as English vowel consonants go? Okay. So basically, with most common sound problems, right, with vowels and consonants, in my experience, based on the people I worked with. Well, it's a lot of the heard, uh, people ask about, that I've heard other teachers talk about, and it's so for vowels, of course, we have the second vowel I, we have the fourth vowel a. Those 2 are like probably 2 of the biggest ones for like the entire language. A. If we go through the vowel chart here, of course, the schwa, whether that's a true schwa or not true schwa, the upside down V. And things about things. Is both a vowel and a consonant, which is basically the same thing. The high schwa, which is like book, right? Book. Like half the vowels, really. I don't want to include ah, because ah can be a problem, but it's usually not one of the big problems, because like even if you use what is probably for most people's native a sound, like ah, it's not going to sound the same, but it's probably going to sound more like the 5th vowel than the 4th vowel, and so that you can kind of get by with that if you're using it in the place of the fifth vowel. It won't sound right. It's not a huge deal, but O is pretty easy. U is pretty easy. So that would be it for the vowels. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 out of 10 vowels. And of course, the half L, which is the dark L. I really hate that I know that, but I kind of have to so that you guys know what I'm referencing. Which I consider a vowel sound. Hlaf. Yes, I can't spell. The hlaf L. That's I don't know, some special L, half L. I would put that, since I put that on the vowel chart, I guess I would include that in the vowels. But whether you see it as a vowel sound or not, it doesn't really matter because it would be a difficult sound. The full L usually isn't as big of a deal, even if it's not said exactly the same as English. It might give you an accent depending on how your native language does the L, especially if you speak a Slavic language. But we would be able to tell it's an L. It's just like a different kind of L. But that half L, the dark L, where you don't actually bring the tongue up, the front of the tongue up, that one is usually difficult. Because how do you make an L without the front of your tongue, right? For consonants, we have the R consonant, which I mentioned. Let's see. I don't have all of these down in my mind as much. I've talked a lot more about vowel sounds with people. T and D, of course, and that's for various reasons. Especially the T, because part of this is spelling problems, right? Like you see a T, but it's silent, or it's dropped, or it's, you know, whatever it is, or it blends with something. So T and D, P, K, G usually aren't too big of a deal. The back N, maybe. It depends. I've had some people that have some major problems with that, but not a whole lot. Let's see. Surprisingly, a lot of people can do zh very easily. I always thought that that would be a difficult sound for people. Probably because it's like the least common consonant sound in English. It's borrowed from French in certain words like measure, or beige, but that's usually not too difficult. Sometimes I noticed for some Russian speakers, apparently the position in the mouth for S and SH is like switched compared to English, and that can cause a bit of a problem in terms of a perfect accent, but it doesn't cause too much problems in terms of being clearly understood. Let's see. What else do we have? F and V, F and V. Yeah, that's right. Because I started the consonants with what are, in my experience, generally the hardest, minus the H, because the H is just like the voiceless vowel, or the voiceless, yeah, the voiceless vowel consonant. So the TH sounds, of course, both THs, the F and the V, that's variable, highly variable. The TH is usually a problem for a lot of people unless you have a TH. The F and the V, a lot of languages seem to have F, but the V can be a problem because either it gets in the way of other sounds, like the W, like I talked about in the W lesson. So you touch and say "vu," "vu," and we don't want that. So the W can also be a problem. But for example, in Spanish, V and B used to be two separate sounds, like however many hundreds of years ago. And so there were words spelled with V and there were words spelled with B. And over time, it kind of came to be the same sound. Technically, there's a very small difference between them. I mean, we can get in. I don't really care about all the technical, like linguistic details of it, but they're essentially the same sound. And it's even to the point, since Spanish is phonetic, right? You'll see, for example, the word cow, which is spelled with a V, is vaca. You'll see native Spanish speakers spelling it like this, If they're lazy or they're just, they don't care to spell correctly, they'll write it with a B, which is very annoying to me, even though it's not my native language. um, so V possibly that can be a problem, and especially between V and TH or F and the voiceless TH, that is commonly a difficult pair. I'm going to be making minimal pairs on that. Did I already make minimal pairs for that? I don't think so. Maybe I did. I don't remember. But either way, um, I think that's about it. There's the Y sound. Y is usually not too big of a deal. I think it should be about it. Yeah. So for consonants, we have what? R, TD, which are like, it's a group, the same thing. The THs, F and V, W. So about 5. So out of all the sounds that we have, there's approximately 11 core difficult sounds in my experience. Unless you want to split TD, the THs, and the F and the V into 2 sounds, then it would actually be what, 14, 13, 14. Which isn't bad, but yeah. And even then, with the consonants, usually, maybe not with the THs, but usually people will have something similar. Like they'll have a T, but it's like dental or something. And so like they could still do a T, like they'll, instead of saying two, they'll say tu, like it would sound in Spanish or something. Um, and it's still understandable, you just have an accent, so it's not the biggest problem. Um, where the vowels, like they're super, super critical, and that's why I always start with the vowels, because we have to get that figured out first, and then we can look at a couple of those consonants and tie up any loose details. So, yeah. But yeah, what I'm gonna do, I think, is actually, I think I already created a playlist for this. Like, yes, it's like most difficult English sounds or something like that. And I'm collecting these ones. It's sort of like a core pronunciation course where it's for the sounds anyway. Where excuse me, instead of going through like all of the lessons and everything, you can focus on like, okay, these are like the biggest sounds that you'll probably have trouble with, regardless of your native language, and you can make sure that you have all of those solid. And if you do, then the rest, maybe you'll have some problems elsewhere, but that should take care of most of your big problems with sounds. Um, what does in mean in this phrase, in my opinion? Okay, good question. Yes, that is a correctly formatted sentence. So, oh, I see. See, that's part of the problem because you're using parentheses, but we would use quotation marks for a phrase in English, just so you know. Because otherwise it looks like extra information rather than the thing you're asking about. But okay, what does in mean in this phrase, in my opinion? Well, it means in. We can talk about why it's used, which is related to the logic of the preposition in, which I promise I will eventually make into a video. I'm going to make the entire book into the course here, but there's so much work to do. So much. I have a feeling I didn't say that right. My mouth doesn't want to work. But yeah, we say in my opinion, right? When you're giving your opinion, right? So what is my opinion about something? I think this. Okay. I think it's good. So whatever your opinion is, that's like a container. It's like an abstract container, right? Because I might think one thing about it, I might think a different thing about it. Maybe you and I disagree. So this is what I think, this is what you think. And there are different ways we can look at that. But for the phrase, in my opinion, it's like if you were to open my mind and look inside, right? in a box called opinions, right? Like we say, in my mind, in my thoughts, in my opinion. Okay, these are like abstract containers that we put stuff into, right? Um, the language can seem kind of weird, and that might not seem very logical, but it's one way to look at it that can help you understand it better or at least remember it more easily. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah. Okay, so you'd agree that vowels are more important than consonants. Thank you for such an exhaustive. I know. My brain and like I have to give all the details that I think are important, and then sometimes my brain goes on a tangent, and it's not so important, but I can't help it. But yes, generally speaking, vowels are much more important than consonants. In fact, maybe with the exception of the th and possibly the v, depending like if a Spanish speaker didn't learn how to pronounce an English v and they always said it with a b, that could cause some problems. So perhaps with the exception of the th and the v sound, you could probably just learn consonants or vowel consonants, just learn vowels in English and never worry about the consonants. And unless you're talented, you're probably not going to sound natural. You're not going to sound, like a native or close to a native. But you'll most likely be extremely easy to understand if you get those vowels good, you know. And then maybe the th and the v as a little bit of special work to actually physically be able to pronounce them. So yeah, the vowels are definitely the biggest. And I'm pretty sure it was an email from Idausen Ness, one of the polyglots that I follow, where it said vowel sounds cause 80% of problems in pronunciation. And I don't remember if that was just in reference to the sounds or if that's like pronunciation overall, including like rhythm and stress and stuff. I'm pretty sure it's for everything. So following the 80-20 rule, which you don't have to do, but is generally a good idea, focus on the vowels. That's going to give you the biggest impact for your pronunciation. Make sure those are really good, and then find the next biggest problems, right? So maybe the th sound, that's going to give you, the next biggest improvement. So whatever it is. Unfortunately, that's kind of an individual thing. Aside from vowels generally being a source of problems for most people, the consonants, it kind of depends on your native language. So I'm putting my consonant lessons in a particular order that I think is, useful, generally useful, but depending on your native language, a different order of looking at them might be more useful. So it just depends. But things on my phone. Anyway, all right. I see we have 4 people and only 3 likes. Who's that 4th person? Hit the like button. You don't have to. By the way, I noticed earlier while you were thinking of what to say, well, yes, you said and emphasized it as well as elongated it in this funky kind of way, like, and yeah, okay, okay. I like the upside down smiley too. And yes, you are welcome. I don't know what to call you because I can't read the script. If you want, you can maybe type your name, your first name in English letters, and I can refer to you with that name. But you are welcome. Yeah, actually, so I am going back to your comment, David. I am on a constant journey of noticing sounds in English because even though I have really good ears, it's like speaking English, my brain didn't need to notice certain differences. Obviously, some things stand out. Like one of my roommates, he's from Nevada, which is Western American, but he says taxes instead of taxes, like Taxes, the plural of tax. And that always stood out to me. I was like, why do you say it that way? That's so weird. But some people say it that way, and that's okay. But especially when it comes to the vowels, like the ing being pronounced with the second vowel instead of the first vowel, and even the instead of the n, like walking. I never noticed that unless it was really exaggerated. Like there was this cartoon called Dexter's Lab that I watched a lot as a kid, and he has this really exaggerated sort of pronunciation, and he says like I'm talking. um so usually I didn't notice most of those things, and because my brain was filtering out the things because I already speak English, I didn't need to hear the sounds, and I wasn't focused on it. So if I turn my ears to the sounds in a language, I tend to be able to hear what maybe I wouldn't have otherwise, but I never needed to do that in English, so I never noticed that. But I now that you guys are pointing out certain details, and I'm like, oh yeah, or I'm just like paying more close attention to how I speak when I'm editing my videos. I'm noticing more and more like little weird things that I do and that I hear other speakers doing. Um, and it's really interesting, especially with the vowel sounds. It's very, very interesting. But um, coming when it comes to saying and, like and, or something kind of like that, part of that is kind of like a personality thing, but part of that is also it's just part of how the language is, right? Because and is usually not stressed. It's like, and in fact, usually it just gets reduced to n, right? Black and white, black and white. But depending if I'm thinking, right, and I'm thinking and I'm okay, blah blah blah, and it might come out as normal. Ah, might be more of an eh kind of, and it could come out all kinds of weird ways, and it could be elongated because I'm thinking. It's just part of the flow of English, based on the context. English is so super super dependent on the exact details of context for both sounds. So how sounds are going to change based on other sounds, and based on emotion, what's going on, around you, and all this stuff. So it's very dynamic. English is very, very dynamic, even in the speech of one individual. There's actually something slightly related to that I wanted to ask you about. I believe Sweden asked last week whether can be used instead of the cat vowel, in words like ham, band, etc. You said that using in those words sounds fine, although it's more of a reduction, and the full clear pronunciation would still use ah. Correct, yes. Ah, with a potential slight modification with the back of the tongue. Hello, Sedent. We were just talking about you. Nice to see you here. But yes, you can still use just a nice clear ah sound. Okay, my question is, why does that reduction apply only to words where ah precedes m and n and not in other environments? Excellent question. Excellent question. Am, I am. Wait, hold on. No. Cam, am. Yeah, okay, it is M. I double check, make sure it was M for sure. Because I've analyzed that mostly with N, but yeah, definitely with M. Okay. The reason why is because of what I was just saying with the back of the tongue. So the sound is still ah. The sound is still ah. Were you here, say like 2 weeks ago when I showed my notebook and I was talking about the range and quality of sounds? I don't remember. I don't know if you were here for that. But this is kind of related to that. Actually, it's directly related to that in terms of the quality, not the range. The sound itself is the same sound. It's ah. but the quality of the sound is a little bit different, and that's for two reasons. One, because normally when we do it should be the same thing with the ng in the back, that like ang, ang. Yeah, it's going to be the same thing. That one is really noticeable as an interference. But when we're going into these nasal sounds, which of course a and g, I would say ang with a diphthong in my pronunciation, so I wouldn't actually say that anyway. Although there might be some words where I would. I don't know. Anyway, the as we start going into those nasal sounds, the back flap that opens into the nose starts to relax, because normally it's closed, or it's like mostly closed, right? And if somebody speaks with like a nasally accent, like Fran Drescher, right, your favorite person, if I remember right, I don't remember. I'm pretty sure it was you I was talking to. Somebody said they like Fran Drescher. That was a while ago, but she has a very nasally voice, so that back flap is just generally much more open when she speaks, right? Because she kind of speaks through her nose. But for most people, who I think there's kind of a range of nasaliness among native speakers of a language. But the average speaker isn't, super, super nasally. I think I'm a little nasally, but when we have the combination of because is so open, right? Even if I don't necessarily open it as much, we kind of get the same thing because it's the most farthest open down in the front. So the position's like way down here. And what's the back of the tongue doing? Well, if that back flap starts to open a little bit, it's going to create a little bit of interference with the sound. And especially because we have such an extreme disparity between the front and the back of the tongue, we kind of start to hear that. But in addition, even if the back of the tongue doesn't come up because we're doing N or M, we tend to kind of raise the back of the tongue up a little bit when it's before M and N, in preparation for that nasal. I don't know why, because it wouldn't make sense unless it were the back N. But for some reason, we do that. We commonly do that. You don't have to do that necessarily, but it is a very common, natural thing that native speakers do. So, yeah, it's just a weird thing. I think it mostly has to do with the physical mechanics that are going on inside the mouth, which usually explains a lot of things, like why we make certain blending sounds and all kinds of things. So, okay, moving on. And yes, I do remember well. Yes, Fran for the win. Okay, good. Actually, I don't remember well. I'm really surprised I remember that was you. I'm actually really surprised I remember that at all, but okay. Some things I remember well for some reason. I don't know. In dictionaries, we find that many words are defined by synonyms. How do we define the precise special meaning of each word? Nuance of meaning, show versus express, utter versus say. That's a good question. So vocabulary question. I don't get a lot of those because I talk about pronunciation a lot. Let's see. Actually, I haven't thought much about this specific question, but this would be my initial thoughts. Yeah, that's a native thing that we do a lot. These would be my initial thoughts. I think that okay, the vocabulary in a language, any language, has certain connections and associations to other vocabulary and phrases, right? And that's not always the same between languages. For example, in Russian, the obviously Russian people have dogs, right? Like dogs are pets, like pretty much everywhere in the world for the most part. And I could be wrong about this. This is just something that I found in the course of my general language learning research. But apparently, in the mind of a Russian speaker, dog is in part associated with wild and savage and because there are a lot of wild dogs in Russia. And there's historical reasons and this and that, whatever. I don't know. I'm not Russian. I don't speak Russian yet. But yes, so there's that sort of association with it, where in English, and I think in many other Western languages, like Western European languages, and maybe even Eastern European languages, dogs, I mean, like maybe like there could be, I mean, there are wild dogs, obviously, but we tend to associate them more with like friend and love and kindness and loyalty, not, like wild and, danger. Um, and so between languages, there's going to be different things, but there's always this web. Okay, coming back to your main question, there's a web. Um, and at the very bottom level, we have very physical things, right? Like fire. Okay, and obviously you see what, like, as a young child, you see what fire is, you feel heat, right? You experience it, you hear somebody say fire in reference to that thing, and that's fire. And other things get built onto that, like I'm saying, heat, right? Or hot, depending on how we're using the word heat, hot. Maybe blue or red or yellow or flame. Flame is another word for fire. And you start building this association, right? So flame and fire are synonyms. Okay, great. And some words are kind of older and maybe less common, so you don't build them into associations right away. Maybe you learn them when you're, a little older, or when you're getting formally educated or whatever it is. Like utter is a little bit more of a fancy word that we might learn in school, where say is obviously a very common everyday word. And so I think that when it comes to the very physical essential level for things like fire, wood, water, even with certain objects like car, house, whatever it is, these very physical things, like they have a particular word. Maybe they have synonyms, but that's like the base word, right? And there's not usually a lot of synonyms for it. Like vehicle, a car is a type of vehicle, but it doesn't really matter what kind of car. Like who cares? Like, okay, is it made by this person, that person, that person? A car is a car. Um, but when we get to more abstract words that aren't so physically based, that's when we really start to get into a lot of synonyms and stuff. And because they're not physically based, we can't point to them, right? If I point to a car or I point to a fire, and I say car or fire, you know what I mean. But if I say show, or if I say, like, what is that? Like, I have to, okay, say, like, and is that say or is that speak? Like we have similar words that don't quite mean the same thing, but they're related to the same idea. And so for these more abstract words, we have certain very common basic level words, of course. They're not all the synonyms are fancy, like show and express are both very common. But because they're not physically based, I don't think that there is a precise special meaning of each word. Now, there is a nuance of meaning, of course. There is a nuance of feeling. Like express sounds a little bit more fancy. Like I want to express my gratitude. So it's more likely to be in that type of phrase where, like, I want to show my gratitude. That's fine. But express sounds a little stronger. It just sounds a little more fancy. Like they kind of go together a bit better. But you could use show as well. And some synonyms are perfect synonyms where, at least in a particular context or phrase, you can just use either one. It doesn't matter. And maybe they feel even exactly the same. Where other times there's shades of gray, and maybe it's used in this particular phrase and maybe not in another phrase. Yeah, fun with synonyms. They look but do not see, and they listen but do not hear or understand. Fun with synonyms, yeah. So I think that I wouldn't look for a precise special meaning. at least for abstract things. But it is a perfectly valid and useful thing to look for the nuance of meaning, and especially the nuance of feeling. One thing that I guess I haven't talked too much about yet on the channel, but I talk a lot about this with the logic of prepositions, and I'm going to be talking more about it when I talk about how to feel verbs and things like that, especially get. That's something I'm working on with some students where we're building an actual physical feeling for the verb get, which it does exist, and it explains all the meanings of get, by the way. That's coming in the future. um, it's also a double-edged sword, right? Because a particular word, it might have a synonym in one meaning, but that word might have another meaning. And maybe that synonym doesn't work for that meaning, right? And so, especially words, many words don't just have one meaning. You know, maybe they might have one specific definition if it's not particularly common, but a lot of common words have uh, two or more meanings or two or more uses, even if they're very similar meanings. So, um, I would work on building the feeling and finding the nuance instead of trying to pinpoint each word. Pinpointing things can work with, say, the prepositions, um, because there's a logical feeling, there's a logical essence, a logical feeling. Yeah, that's an oxymoron. um, but with the average word, I don't think that there's just too many words. um, and I don't think it's as useful in all contexts. I hope that helps answer your question. Again, these are my initial thoughts on this. That was kind of rambling a bit, but that's kind of what I do. So if you have any follow-up questions or you want to further refine the question, if you know, my response gave you any other ideas, feel free to mention those. But yeah, fun with synonyms, I would say is not fun with synonyms. Like I hate synonyms. I really do. Like for me as a native speaker, like using synonyms, like, it's not a problem, but teaching synonyms, it's kind of a pain. And generally speaking, you don't have to worry too much about synonyms until you're advanced, because which I mean, if you're following my flow of speech now, uh, the person asking this question, I still don't know how to refer to you. um, but it seems to me like maybe you might be at least upper intermediate, if not advanced. Um, so, but I don't know. Um, what was I going to say? I lost my thought. Yeah, one of the things is when you're learning a language, it depends on your goals. It depends what you want to do. You know, you could do whatever you want. But as general advice, especially if one of your main goals is speaking, um, one of the very first things that you should be aiming for is conversational fluency, right? Once you get to conversational fluency, that's not perfect grammar. That's not knowing all the words that you need. It's, you know, maybe being able to talk around the words that you don't know, which is a very great skill. But when you get to conversational fluency, then you start to fill in the little holes and details in your grammar. You start to fill in little holes and details in your vocabulary for, like, you know, basic everyday words. And as you start getting up into that advanced level, you have a very solid base, but you know, and you really don't have to go past B2, which is conversational fluency. You really don't, if you don't want to. And a lot of people get stuck there because they're too comfortable, right? They can understand so much and they can speak well enough that it's hard to find the motivation to keep pushing farther. I discovered that problem in Spanish. um, so, but when it comes to synonyms, and starting to feel the nuance and the difference, you need a solid base for there first. So like if you know show, okay, and then maybe now you learn express, okay, or you learn utter instead of say. So that's definitely more of an advanced level thing that I wouldn't worry about if you're not already advanced. Or it could be something that helps get you up into the advanced level, but that depends on the specific things that you need. Obviously, from B2 to C1, the upper intermediate to advanced, that's the biggest gap of all the gaps except C1 to C2, which is insane. But that's the biggest practical gap that most people face, and large part of that gap is just vocabulary. So okay, it has become a nightmare for me. Also, before we move on, really quick, with synonyms, some synonyms are super useful and common and very nice to know. But one thing I would also point out is if you don't plan to do a lot of writing, especially formal writing, and you're mostly going to be using the language for like conversation or just everyday speech or whatever, um, synonyms can be a great way to improve your knowledge and your ability to express yourself. But a lot of those synonyms, especially the fancier words, they're not even going to really be used in everyday speech. And if they are, they're not commonly used, right? Because they're not as common. So some of them would definitely be worth learning, but some of them, like I had one student that we were looking at a vocabulary list that she got from the Big Bang Theory. Um, And obviously, in the Big Bang Theory, it's a lot of science terms, a lot of nerd terms, superhero stuff, game references and stuff like that. And even if the average native speaker doesn't understand all of the sciencey terms or all of the references, it's entertaining, and we still understand basically what's going on. Okay, it's some sciencey thing. Um, where an English learner, they may not know, is this a word I need to know, or is this like a sciencey term, or is this just like a fancy word? Because sometimes nerds like myself like to use fancy words, even though they may not necessarily be the most common everyday words that most people would use. And so you might find words that you're not sure if they are common or not. And there are tools that you can use to find how common it is and if you should learn it. But if you like it, just learn it, of course. Um, but if you don't plan to do much writing or formal writing, I wouldn't worry too much about synonyms unless it's important to you, because you want to improve just your general ability to understand and or refine the way that you speak. If you want to speak a little more sophisticated, or just use different phrases. Um, it's definitely not the main focus until you have a solid upper intermediate level. Okay, it has become a nightmare for me. I am so confused, but working on it. Good. Not good that it's a nightmare, but good that you are working on it. um, that could be a very good sign, actually, because as I told you, the feedback I gave you for that one recording, it was like you're pretty much perfect. Like the isolation was perfect and most of the words were perfect. And then you sent me the other recording and you kind of lost it, and that can happen. Um, that can be a part of the process. It means that you're generally moving in the right direction. I know it's frustrating, and you're just like, "Oh, why can't I get this?" I had that with a few sounds in German, a couple sounds in Spanish, and it was just like, "Why is this so difficult?" Like, I still don't think I can do a very good German R sound. um, I appreciate your feedback. Yes, no problem. Well, you're a patron, right? So I definitely want to give you guys a little extra because you are supporting me directly. Um, but yeah, it's something, especially for these really, really hard sounds that are hard to pinpoint, especially for vowels in particular. Sometimes you'll take, two steps forward, one step back, or even one step forward, two steps back. But as long as you keep trying, you keep going in that direction, your brain is just kind of trying to adjust, and it tells me that one time that you recorded, you managed to find it. And as I said, you keep going into the same position, even if it's like it's off, you go into the exact same off position. So you have very good tongue control. It's just after you did it, you got it so accurate that first time, you as you try to build up the muscle memory, you kind of lost it a little bit, and so you don't have that neural pathway in your brain built yet to go exactly into the right position all the time. And so it's kind of like you're trying to aim at a target. It's like sometimes you hit it, sometimes you miss it. Um, so yeah, I'll keep giving you guidance. Just send me some recordings every once in a while. You're on the right track. Um, it seems like the tongue is hovering in the middle of the mouth and is held flat. Well, there's actually a few different ways that you can do the sound in terms of the exact way that you hold your tongue. But let's see. See, what did you say? I think I would need to hear the sound in person from a native. I guess this isn't in person, but it seems like the tongue is hovering. And yes, that's exactly what happened with me. I lost the sound. Yeah, it happens. It's unfortunately part of the process. Like I've had that with students where like in class, like within the same hour class, like they get it and then they lose it by the end of the class. It's part of the process. It's part of the process. Just keep moving towards it. This is one reason why it can be so difficult to develop like a perfect or near perfect accent, because even if you manage to get the sound, you might lose the sound, and you have to keep pushing forward to get it consistently 100%. So it's just playing with it. It's just playing with it. Because really, what you're doing, you're rewire. You're trying to, well, not rewiring isn't the best term, because you still have the wiring in your brain for how to use the sound in Hindi, because the sound does exist in Hindi. Or if you didn't have the sound, you have the wiring to sort of go around it based on the other sounds. And so you're trying to sort of build a slightly different neural pathway in your brain, and that takes like actual like real energy and time, because you're literally building the neural connections in your brain to get your tongue to go to that perfect spot. So yeah, how rude, Eden. You didn't say hi. You left David hanging. Why would you do that? But anyway, yeah. So that's why it's all part of the process. You're literally trying to physically wire your brain to be able to do this. So just keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. Micro adjustments, right? Micro adjustments are the key. I haven't talked too much about that on this channel yet. I need to definitely do that more and put some of that a little bit earlier in the course for the pronunciation course. But micro adjustments. So if shadowing is the super amazing technique that is like the secret weapon for language learning, micro adjustments are the physical means by which you pinpoint sounds and can shadow correctly. So whether you're shadowing an individual sound, like you're trying to get the pinpoint sound, well, pinpoint, or you're shadowing a sentence or a word or whatever it is, the micro adjustments are the most important things, and trying to be able to feel your tongue. So I'm kind of confused. Sometimes I feel like I got the sound, and after a while, my brain kind of tries to connect the sound with some other sound that I already know. Yes, that can happen. I am not a linguist. I'm not a scientific expert on this. I'm not a neuroscientist, but yes, in my experience, that is definitely possible. And it's not just with language, but language is a little special compared to other skills, because like if you go to learn the guitar or the piano, or you're playing basketball or baseball, whatever it is, the physical mechanics of that thing, I guess it depends. Maybe in sports you kind of know how to run, so you kind of already have that. But let's take the guitar, right? You're not born knowing how to play the guitar. You have to figure out physically what do you do with your fingers, and you have two hands and they each have to do different things, and you have to coordinate them, right? um, so that's something completely new, right? Where in language, if once you pass a certain age, your brain has already sort of wired in certain sounds, and that doesn't mean you can't learn to hear and produce new sounds. It just means that it's a little bit different than learning an instrument, which is kind of from scratch, right? Your brain already has the physical mechanics down to go to certain sounds. So as you're trying to learn a new sound or a slightly new way to do the same sound that we actually know now is in Hindi, um, the wiring in your brain, the neural pathways, are like, okay, we have this pathway built, we have this pathway built for these sounds, and you want to kind of go up over here, right? And so as you're trying to build this path up here, your brain keeps it's going the path of least resistance, right? It's like if you pour water and it's going to go through the grooves where you're trying to physically build a new groove, a new pathway. And so the water doesn't flow as easily. You have to physically build that pathway through micro adjustments, repetition, shadowing, in order to let the water more easily flow down that path. Um, that's the hard work of pronunciation and ear training. So it sounds to me like you're definitely on the right track. I know it's confusing. I know it's frustrating. But if you really want it, again, you don't have to have a perfect accent. If you really want it and you're willing to put in the work, you're on the right track. So that's my encouragement to you. You can do it. You've already made the sound perfectly before, right? It's just you've started to build the path. It's just not solid enough compared to the other paths. So, oh, by the way, here's some news. I'm not exactly sure when, because I have to figure out what I'm going to do. But once I get my channel monetized, of course, I'm still going to be making videos. I'm still going to be making as many videos as I can. I'm trying to build up this channel. But once I get it monetized, I probably mentioned before, I'm going to start bringing in missions for other skills that I want to build, like drawing, music, whatever. And one thing is programming. And I actually got an idea because one thing I never had when I tried to learn how to program before was a project, right? You know, they say, oh, build a calculator or, you know, build this or build, and it's like, I don't care about that. But now I have a project, an ear trainer. An ear trainer. I want to build an ear trainer, and I have the idea for it. I think it would be relatively simple to execute in Python, which is a programming language. And so I'm not 100% sure if that's the first thing I'm going to work on, but I think what I'm going to do is once my channel gets monetized, I'm going to do a 3-month mission to teach myself how to program and build this ear training app that you would be able to download and put on your computer, maybe your phone. I don't know. I might need another language for that, but definitely you would be able to put it on your computer. And I'm going to offer it on my website for free. And if anybody wants to, you know, give a little donation for downloading it, then they can. But yes, I want to build that. So relatively soon, I'm going to actually build an ear trainer for you guys. But when it comes to the mouth, obviously we looked at Elsa and the AI. I don't think AI is quite up to the native natural level task of giving you feedback. And I wouldn't know how to do AI anyway. So unfortunately, Sedent, that doesn't help your tongue. But I am going to be building an intensive ear trainer for you guys that you can use for free. Okay, now David has been writing like a madman. So let's see. By the way, since you often guess, I understand like 96% of what you say, and very comfortably so. But sadly, I still struggle to a degree with things like movie and music. Movies and music. Okay. Since you often guess. I think you mean as you often guess. Because since would mean something slightly different, unless maybe I'm just not thinking of this the right way. As and since can be used very similarly, but in this case, there's a difference. So yeah, you can clarify that if you want. We can talk a little bit more about the details there to make sure that we fix that, because that's a nice little thing, a nice little correction that I can give you since you usually don't make a lot of mistakes. When I interact with people face to face or listen to videos with no cuts of people talking, I'm fine, but for some reason my brain's comprehension of spoken English gets messed up whenever I watch movies and there's a lot of noise in the background, cuts that disturb the flow of conversation, or people whose accent I am not used to, etc. And I'm trying to figure out how much of that difficulty is because English isn't my native language and how much of it is natural. Very good questions. We're going to talk about that. With many songs I listen to, I literally hear just this muffled audio blur and then the odd words sticking out. Yeah, I know how that goes. Funnily enough, when I look up the lyrics and listen to the same song while looking at the lyrics, I literally facepalm. I know, right? I know. It's interesting that you have that problem at your level. That's the surprising thing to me, but strange things happen. And then Seedent says, David, we need you for Skype meetup. Always with the Skype meetup. um, yes, no pressure for anybody, but if we have at least 3 people, we can potentially do a Skype meetup. Anyway, let's address this. The first thing that comes to my mind here, which doesn't explain everything, but I think definitely explains part of it, especially when you're talking about like background noise and things like that, things that, cuts and things that disturb the flow of conversation, or an accent. What you practice is what improves. That is the one universal law of all skill development. Also, really of all learning, but especially of all skill development. What you practice is what improves. I will say that over and over and over on this channel. I will say it over and over and over on my other channel that I'm eventually going to make related to building other skills. um, oh, and you would love to join. Okay, well, it looks like as long as Elmi is still on board, looks like we're probably going to have us a Skype meetup on Patreon. So there you go. We'll come back to that. But what you practice is what improves. I want to drill that into the head of every single human being on this planet who wants to develop a skill. Whatever that skill is, what you practice is what improves. Knowledge is important, but when it comes to skill development, the knowledge does not magically become skill. Okay? Now, what that means is, let's say you want to improve your pronunciation, but you spend a lot of time reading. Obviously, even if you're listening to audiobooks, okay, yeah, you have listening, you have some input, some auditory input. It can have an effect if you're trying to pay attention to the sounds. But if you're trying to pay attention to the words and understanding the words, it's not going to help your pronunciation much or your ears much. Okay. Now, in the long, hard way of things, like if you didn't do any pronunciation and ear training, eventually your brain is going to start to be able to figure things out just from mass exposure. The pronunciation and ear training makes that process a bit faster and easier. So the listening will indirectly improve your ability to hear. You do need to listen a lot. That's definitely a thing. Sometimes it's a lack of vocabulary. But if it's like background noise or accents, what that tells me is you just haven't had a lot of exposure. You haven't had a lot of practice with background noise, with accents, with cuts, whatever it is. And you might think like that shouldn't be a problem, right? Because if you know the words and you can understand the words normally, why can't I understand it if there's some background noise? Your brain is a complex thing. It's doing just me talking to you now, instead of just like falling over dead. My brain and my body are doing some very amazing, wonderful things right now for me to be able to communicate with you guys. And for you to be able to understand, especially not as a native speaker, to be able to understand what I'm saying. And so everybody's a little bit different. That's always part of the equation as well. But you need to practice with those things. So if you want to get better at understanding with background noise, maybe listen to stuff that you can understand easily, but also, like maybe on a second device or something, put a little bit of white noise just in the background, not super, super loud, but just kind of there so you can still hear it. And it's kind of trying to pull your attention and still try to, use that as like training. You don't have to do that, but you could if you wanted to. That could possibly help. Or instead of white noise, it could be, traffic in the background, just traffic noises or whatever it is. I wouldn't worry too much about that for background noise because I think eventually your brain just adjusts, but you could target it specifically if you wanted to get rid of that problem. Okay, I'm going to come back in a second, but Student says, let's seal the deal then, right here, right now. Okay, yeah, so I guess the deal is sealed. And Steve, welcome to the chat, Steve. Very nice to have you here. I want to get to your question. Could you say these two words slowly? Okay, very nice. Yeah, so the first one with the E is the third vowel, eh, eh, okay? And the second one with A is the fourth vowel, ah. Because of the N, there can be a slight little change in the quality of the sound, as I was talking about earlier. But I'll say these side by side, first with the E and then with the A. Okay. Men, man, men, man. Does that help? Which, by the way, speaking of slowly, don't forget that YouTube and a lot of YouTube and a lot of other video platforms, regardless if it's a YouTube format video or not, uh, have the ability to slow down and speed up the audio, usually down to like 0.25 and all the way up to 2 times. I listen to almost everything on YouTube at 2 times. You helped me a lot. Thanks. Good. Awesome. Glad I could help. Yeah, I listen to almost everything at 2 times speed. And going back to what David was talking about, that could be another thing that you might want to try doing is, unless you already do it, I don't know, watch things in English that you would normally have no problem with, right? Not with the background noise or anything like that, just normal things. But put it on 1.5 speed or 1.75 or 2 times. You could work your way up to 2 if you want. I'm at the point where when I listen to anything in English, unless it's music, I don't listen to music on 2 times speed. But if I'm listening to news or whatever it is, or podcast, I'll put it on 2 times speed. And my brain is just so adjusted that I often go to try to put it on 2 times speed, but it's already on 2 times speed. And I'm like, oh my God, it just sounds normal. And I want a 4 times speed button. And I really wish YouTube would put a 4 times speed button on their videos. Saves a lot of time, especially if you're trying to learn things. But that's one thing that you can do. I did that in Spanish. I tried it in Spanish at one point, and 2 times speed at first was very, very difficult. But I was able to actually kind of. I was like, oh yeah, I mostly understand what's going on. Some of it was a vocabulary problem, but it's amazing what your brain can do, even in a foreign language. So yeah. Anyway, so try 2 times speed, or I thought of this because Steve wanted me to say those 2 words slowly. If you ever have any trouble, watching my videos or watching, any other English videos, you can slow it down. Now, I would do that in a targeted way because you want your brain to get used to the natural flow of speech. Remember, what you practice is what improves. So if you're always listening at, say, 0.75 or 0.5 speed, that's what you're practicing for your listening. And that can be useful depending, especially if you're using it maybe for shadowing. You're kind of trying to slow it down and kind of shadow or whatever. Or you just don't understand a particular thing, or you want to compare 2 sounds, that maybe in one of my lessons I say them side by side and you slow it down. Use it in a targeted way. But when it comes to slowing it down, I would definitely not use that all the time. I can understand you 100%, even if I'm not paying attention. That's magical. That's magical. I'm not surprised. I haven't heard you speak extensively, but from what I have heard you say, with little details here and there, you sound pretty fantastic already, and so I imagine you're listening. Usually our listening ability is higher than our speaking and pronunciation ability. So if you can understand me 100%, even if you're not paying attention, I wouldn't be surprised. Although the fact that you're not paying attention is very impressive, because you would think that you just wouldn't understand anything if you're actually really not paying attention. Maybe that was a joke and I missed it. I don't know, but that happens sometimes too. Okay, yeah. So coming back to the songs, I want to make sure I don't miss anything here. I'm trying to figure out how much it is. Yeah, I want to mention really quick about accents. Same thing with accents. Uh, What I usually recommend to my students is when you're first developing your pronunciation, even if you're an intermediate speaker and you're just now trying to improve your pronunciation, focus on one accent, okay? Because you don't want to be, having all this interference and craziness. That doesn't mean that you can't listen to things in other accents. I don't recommend it, but it's not going to be the biggest deal as long as you spend most of your time focusing on one accent, especially with your pronunciation training. But once you have a nice solid level, even if it's not 100% perfect, you have a good grasp, you know how things should be more or less. Then you say you listen to British English and you're like, hey, I have difficulty understanding this, or you listen to Indian English or whatever. You don't have to, go and listen to all the different dialects and try to understand them. But generally, a native speaker of English will be able to, at least 98, 99% understand a native speaker of English from any other accent, with some special possible exceptions. And so you should ideally have that ability. So what you want to do is just spend some time, because notice a native English speaker, we grow up with at least some influence to British English, right? Because we know, oh, that sounds kind of British to us, right? Or with some influence of Australian English, right? Especially in the media these days. There's British English, Irish English, all kinds of stuff. British is probably the biggest influence that we get, but that's kind of part of our native upbringing as Americans is we just get exposed to some other accents. Maybe even like a Mexican, or well, I guess Mexican accent is like a Spanish accent, a Chinese accent. People who speak with accents from other languages, and so our brain is able to sort of compensate and adjust and say, okay, we understand that. So you just need to spend some time listening to English with other accents. What you practice is what improves. And with that little extra feedback, I think it's going to give you a lot of benefit to be able to say if you just spend, some intense concentrated time listening to British English, not trying to pronounce it that way, but just like watching British TV shows, this and that, whatever, your brain's going to kind of adjust. And then when you go listen to, say, I don't know, some other accent, like Australian English, you'll probably have an easier time, even though the accent is a little different, because your brain is used to trying to approximate the sounds based on what you already know. So that's how I would fix that. When it comes to songs, songs are interesting because there's a rhythm, like a special rhythm. I mean, it usually fits the rhythm of the language more or less, but I mean, nobody like Whitney Houston, right? Like nobody says "I will always," nobody speaks that way. You got to hold those notes, right? Hold those words. So it's sort of a special way of speaking, a special format of speech. I think in songs they butcher the vowel sounds, so I won't worry too much about it. Yeah, sometimes vowel sounds can get a little bit weird. Some strange things can happen. And following up here, you said so you and other people don't have any difficulties when listening to songs. No, not in English. However, however, as a general rule, in general, no, we don't have problems. Like I can listen to any song in English, even by like say a British speaker or whatever, and I won't really have any problems. Okay, but that depends. That depends. There are some songs that many natives, just because of like maybe how fast the song is, how the words kind of blend together, um, and just various factors that like it kind of sounds like it's one word but it's actually a different word. And you maybe you heard the song as a kid, and then when you grow up and you actually look at the lyrics and you're like, oh, I was always saying that word, but it's actually this word. So things like that do happen, but those are isolated cases, like maybe like usually just a word or maybe a phrase. um but again, that usually has to do with something with like the speed or like some crazy rhythm or something that's going on. So it is possible, but usually no. We understand English music just fine. Um, there's so much weird stuff from pronouncing. Yeah, baby. Yeah, that's a special one. Yeah, gone. Yeah, gone, going. I'm gone. I gone to the store. I done gone to the store. Anyway, sometimes people hit the target without even focusing too much on the target. Yeah, I know. And it's totally opposite. With me, I focus too much on the target and then completely lose it. Yeah, there you go. That's the magic. I'd like to watch Josh listen to Rihanna's work. If that's the song I'm thinking of, I've already listened to it. Yes, that's that really crazy song where it's like da na 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 na, right? I don't think anybody understands that song, honestly. And if they do, bravo to them because I certainly don't understand it. That would be a special exception where like she's there's a line, right? I'm telling you guys how to speak naturally and how to sound natural instead of like super enunciated all the time. But there is a line of a basic level of enunciation that if you drop below that, you are no longer understandable by other people. And I think she did a very good job in that song of crossing below that line. But maybe that's just me. Okay. Uh, by the way, what is your favorite Christmas song? My favorite Christmas song. Yeah, mumble rap is a problem. Yeah. Favorite Christmas song. I don't have a favorite Christmas song. In fact, I hate Christmas music. I know another thing about me that is so much different and crazy compared to other people. I don't hate Christmas. There's no problem with it. I'm not religious. I'm not Christian or anything. So, I don't celebrate it for religious reasons. But, get together with family, spend time, all that stuff like that. That's good. I think that's a perfectly fine thing. Um, but just the Christmas songs, because the reason I hate them isn't because they're necessarily bad. It's because every year, no matter where you go, even in my own house, because my roommate loves Christmas songs, you're just surrounded by Christmas music. And because you listen to these songs as a kid growing up, as soon as you hear it, your brain just keeps it on loop and it just keeps repeating. And so as I was editing my video earlier, I was just going dun 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. And I just kept doing that. I caught myself doing that as I was like editing. And I'm just like, oh my God, I can't get it out of my head. um, Frosty the Snowman, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, they just, for like a whole 2 month period, from like the end of November to the end of January, it's just my mind is surrounded by Christmas music and it just keeps running it over and over and over and over again. And I hate it because I can't get it out of my head. So yeah, more skulls. That's fine. I don't care. I hate Christmas music. Aside from that, how do you fix that with music? So I actually, when it comes to like you listen to music and you look at the lyrics, obviously music is a little bit different. It can be a very fantastic tool, especially if you approach it in a certain way. Um, One of the interesting things for me, and I don't know if this will help you because again, I'm kind of surprised that you have this problem with your general listening ability. But and I probably mentioned this before, but when I was really learning Spanish, teaching myself Spanish, and I was maybe upper beginner, heading into lower intermediate, more or less. Not my speaking skill, but everything else. Um, and I found that TV show Gran Hotel. Um, and I know I mentioned before, I found the first season with subtitles, couldn't find the other two seasons without subtitles, so I just decided to watch it anyway. And then, like magic, overnight after one or two nights after I finished the series, like magic, I was just able to understand more. Um, and that includes music, right? So there were songs that I had listened to probably hundreds of times, but I never looked up the lyrics for them, right? Because I never thought to do that for some reason. Um, and all of a sudden, I wasn't understanding 100%, but I was understanding a lot more. Um, and that might partially have been because I had heard the song so many times, but because my brain had this little boost from the series that I was watching, it was able to start parsing things out a little bit better. But yeah, that's a common thing where you're trying to listen, whether it's music, movies, a conversation, you're trying to listen, and if you could see the text, you understand. right? That just means that your listening skills aren't at the same level as your vocabulary knowledge, which is okay. That's another reason why I really emphasize starting with ear training, because the physical ability to perceive and parse sounds will allow you to actually be physically prepared to listen to the language. Um, so I don't know. What I expect is that if you listen to things on 2 times speed, or you do things like with the background noise, you listen to accents, watch Doctor Who, like all seasons of Doctor Who. It's like it's probably the best show on the planet. Um, whatever it is, do that for a while. Maybe set up a little mission for yourself. And then come back to music and see if it improves. I bet that it probably will improve because you're giving your brain more to deal with. And it's just for some reason with the music, your brain kind of isn't able to handle things as well for whatever reason. So, just give it some time and maybe increase the speed of normal speech. I have a question about Mistletoe and Holly, when sung by Frank Sinatra, though. Why is he singing, "Oh my gosh, my golly," but it sounds like, "Oh my gosh, my golly"? Is he like pretending to have a cold? Or are the actual words "by" and not "my"? That's a good question. I'm pretty sure I know what song you're talking about, but I'm gonna have to actually listen to verify what he's saying. Because yeah, let's go to YouTube. YouTube has all of the auditory goodness of the world. Frank Sinatra. Oh God, this is gonna make YouTube start suggesting Christmas songs to me. It's gonna be horrible. That's okay. I'll never click on any of them. Um, Not Holly Jolly Christmas. What was the song? Mistletoe and Holly. That's it. Mistletoe and Holly. Okay. Let's see. Is this it? Yeah. Okay. I don't know where it would be in the song though. Um, yeah. Yeah, he says bye. Oh, by gosh, by golly. Yeah, it's very clearly bye. Yeah, right at the start. That's good. It's very useful. Oh, by gosh, by golly. Actually, I don't think I've ever heard this song. Um, more skulls, because I've never heard that song. It's like, where do you live, under a rock? Yeah, pretty much. I don't like the world. um, okay, things. Hold on. Drink break. Break. Drink break. Excuse me. I was thirsty. So what does it even mean? By gosh, by golly, I have no idea. um, okay, so we can sort of break this down. Okay, first gosh, no, first golly. Okay, nobody born after probably the 60s or the 50s says golly. My grandma says it, but she was born in the 30s. I'm pretty sure she was born in the 30s, somewhere around there. So golly is an older word that most people don't use anymore. And it's probably I don't know if he created the song. I'm sure it's a song that has been around for a long time, and he's just he made his own version of the song, whatever his recording, because people do that. Um, yeah, it's by it's exactly good. Very good season. Glad you can hear that. Yeah, B and M can sometimes sound kind of similar, but in this case, it's very clearly a B. So golly, basically, you don't even have to really worry about that word. This is one of the very rare cases where you're actually going to find it, and it's because it's in this Christmas song. Yeah, it's a special case. Gosh is also pretty uncommon. It's used mostly as a family-friendly way to say God, so that you don't, as they say, use God's name in vain. Like you're not supposed to say, "Oh my God," Um, but a lot of people these days aren't particularly religious, and so we don't care, and we just say God. um, So gosh is used, but it's just, it's like saying fudge instead of the F word. Um, with by, that's the tricky part here. Let's see. So if I say, I don't know. Okay, this is an actual expression we have. If I don't know, let's say the town, the village idiot, right? He's the one person who's able to solve the problem, right? And he's like, "This is the solution." And then somebody says, "By God," or "By George," because King George. That's a cultural thing. Even Americans sometimes use that, but these days not really, but by God or by George or by gosh or whatever it is. I think he's right. By God, I think he's right. It's a little bit of an older expression, but that would be using by the same way. And by is a really, really abstract, difficult preposition. I talked about it in the logic of prepositions, and I will have a video for that in the future. Everything in the future. Oh my gosh, yes, same thing instead of oh my God. But by in a phrase like this, ugh, I the soda is making me burp. Sorry, you probably hear that. I apologize. I'll just not have my microphone on. Better still. Oh my gosh, Josh. Yeah, I know. There you go. I don't think that's better, but sure, we'll go with that. um, but shouldn't it be oh my guru, Josh? Because remember, I'm the guru. I'm the English guru. um, anyway, that's a reference to earlier live streams for anybody watching that wasn't there. You'd have to be there to get it. For by, I don't even remember how I should explain this right now because by is so abstract. The logic of by, I don't even remember what the logic of by was. I have to check it. Yeah, this is one that it's so hard to pin down. By gave me such a headache when I was writing the book. It's one of the last ones that I finished because I was just like, how does this even work? Um, I need to open my book. Where's my book? Oh, I have my book over there. That's right. I have a physical copy. So we have our lovely book, The Logic of Prepositions, which looks backwards to me. I hope it's not backwards to you, unless you're Da Vinci, in which case, you can read that just fine. Nerd references. So, by, where is by? Because even if nobody else cares now, I have to remember because this is going to bug me. Where's my table of contents? Okay. By 203. 203. Yeah, this book is like almost 400 pages, guys. It's ridiculous. 400 pages about prepositions. Who would do that? What kind of sick, twisted, psychopathic, self-hating person would write 400 pages about prepositions? I would. Because I'm one of those very strange people that actually gets excited by this. Okay, by. Yes, I see the examples. Yeah, that's what I thought it was, but I was like, that doesn't sound right. Okay, so the key word or phrase, the key idea is a path or a way. Okay, so a path or a way. Now, physically, obviously, that makes a lot of sense because we say like, I live by the school. Okay, so if you walk along the path that leads to the school, my house is next to it, or around it in some way. By could mean next to, or it could mean around physically. Um, See, even physically, by is kind of abstract. It doesn't really have like a pinpoint thing. So let's see here. Is this useful? Yeah. And part of the reason for that, even the lyrics say by, oh, well, whatever it is. Anyway. Well, I mean, who knows? There could be sometimes lyrics, depending on the source, are not always right. That's a problem I found in Spanish and sometimes in German. But okay, let's look a little bit at yeah. I'm just going to read this. So my explanation of the logic, right? Right here, I say the preposition by is probably the most abstract of all the prepositions. And I had a lot of difficulty trying to find the exact logic and putting the feeling of it into words because I can feel it. As a native speaker, I can feel it. But can you describe that feeling? Feelings are already hard enough to describe. So there are two words that are very similar, but we usually use them in different contexts and different ways. For example, in this context, we don't say we use them in different paths, right? So path and way are very similar words, but they're not always used in the same places or the same ways. Some of the example sentences that I have listed here in 5 groups fit both of the ideas path and way. They'll both work in maybe very clearly as synonyms, or maybe in some abstract way you could say, okay, that could be a path or that could be a way. And you can sometimes very abstractly fit most of the uses of the preposition by into the idea of way. The reason I add, yeah, now I remember. The reason I say path or way is because path covers a little bit that way doesn't, and because path and way are very, very similar words, combined, they sort of get the whole thing, where way doesn't quite 100% cover everything. So way is really the main idea, but path gives us a little bit of more dimension to it to grasp onto. I guess my brain assumed it's my, as that's what's usually used with gosh and golly. Yeah, probably. Oh my gosh, oh my golly. I've only heard them with by in the yeah, the typo was on purpose. Song. I'm gonna say it like that. Song. Like the way I tell you guys not to say it. Because if you were to write it that way, a native the funny thing is, because this is not spelled with AW, if a native speaker were to read that, they would think that it's on purpose and that you want the speaker to say it in a wrong, exaggerated way, and they would actually probably pronounce it like song, like the way that you're not supposed to say it, but you might try to say it if you saw AW. Anyway, things. Okay. Now, there are some uses of the preposition by that are simply too abstract to realistically fit into the idea of way. And as I was saying, I added path, which is very similar, to sort of give us a complete idea or a complete feeling. The preposition by is naturally very abstract, and you might have difficulties completely understanding it at first. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. Now, the etymology notes. I know this is probably very technical and whatever, but it's short. It's just a little paragraph here for the etymology notes. This is very useful and important information, which is why I included it in the etymology notes. For anybody who does not know, etymology is the history of words, right? Okay, so the etymology or the history of the preposition by is extremely useful for English learners. Not for native English speakers, but for English learners. By comes from the Old English be, like be dash or bi. I don't know how those were supposed to be pronounced, but one was obviously a prefix, which meant it's, I guess those were interchangeable, which meant what is now the meaning near, in, by, during, and about. So this little be, by thing, whatever, meant near, in, by, during, about. 5 different meanings. Old English tended to do that. This originally came from the Proto-Germanic, which is what Old English came from, so Proto-Germanic is even older. Word bi, by, whatever, which meant around or about. Okay. Lastly, the Proto-Germanic word came from the Proto-Indo-European word, and we're going way back in history. So modern English came from Middle English, came from Old English, came from Proto-Germanic, because it's a Germanic language. And Proto-Germanic came from Proto-Indo-European, which also included where Sanskrit came from. So we're going way back, covering a very large area of land. So the Proto-Germanic word for by came from the Proto-Indo-European word ambi. The AM was apparently optional. Ambi, and this was a prefix. Which is very interesting because we have words in English like ambidextrous. I don't know if that's related, but that means like you can use both your hands equally. So ambi would mean both or two. And this, I mean, I guess like if you're doing something by hand with your hands, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's probably not even related. But this Proto-Indo-European word, ambi, or ambi, whatever, meant around. Okay. So we can see that over time, the original idea of around something, right, expanded to include many other meanings. This expansion, including new and different applications of the modern preposition by, continued through Middle English and into modern English. This is why the preposition by is so abstract and why it touches or sometimes overlaps with many other prepositions. However, even though it's so abstract, it still has a logic and a feeling, which is very true. This was probably the hardest preposition in the entire book, and I hate it. I absolutely hate this preposition. Because even now, even though I wrote the damn book, literally, it's still difficult. Like people say, why do we use by in this sentence? It's still difficult for me to say, well, I can feel it. I know what it is, but it's just so difficult to describe in certain cases because it's so hard to put into words. But that key of our around is very, very important, right? I know we're getting way off topic from by gosh, by golly, but trust me, it's actually directly related. What are we at? An hour, 42 minutes? Okay, we're fine. It's not even 2 hours yet. We're fine. Notice, right, when I said physically, right, like if I live by the school, okay, that could mean physically next to, right? Like if I stand by someone, I stand next to someone, okay. But it could also mean that maybe like the school, like in fact, this is actually true. When I was in high school, I lived by the school. But I did not live right next to the school. The school was here. There was a little hill, and then my house was here. Okay, so I wasn't directly next to the school, but I could still say I lived by the school. And it's also very relative to the scope of what you're talking about. So if I say, I don't know, if we're talking about the entire United States, so physically between San Diego and Los Angeles, it's about a 2-hour drive, right? It's like 100 miles or something. It's very far distance. Well, I guess maybe in America it's not too far, but it's a ways, right? It takes you a while to get there. But if we're talking about the scope of the entire United States, you could say very easily and very logically, Los Angeles is by San Diego, or San Diego is by Los Angeles, right? Because everybody knows where Los Angeles is. So where's San Diego? Oh, it's by Los Angeles. Even though physically it's actually nowhere near Los Angeles, but in that scope, it actually is, right? It's in Southern California. What if somebody lives by the book? That's a very good question. That's another application. I'm going to come to that. That's actually more directly tied to by gosh, by golly. So I'm building the path. I'm literally building the path here. So that core meaning from Indo-European and Proto-Germanic of around, we can clearly see that even in the very physical use of by. Okay. Now, for whatever reason, over time, I know the suspense. For whatever reason, over time, and I don't know exactly when each meaning came into existence. All I know is the modern English usages. We ended up with what I would identify as 5 groups. How I got these groups is I went to the dictionary and I looked up as many different meanings of each preposition as I could. And sometimes in the dictionary you'll find like meanings either kind of repeat or they're just so similar that it's like, well, you might as well just put that into the same thing. And so I tried to create these sort of like rough groups of meaning that would all fit within like a certain special keyword for that group. And why was I talking about that? I lost my thought already. uh, apparently, we haven't even hit 2 hours, and apparently it is too much. I can't do it. Anything important on my phone? No. Okay. Oh yeah. So just to clarify that these groups aren't necessarily, the dictionary definitions, but they're my logical groupings of either just one definition, sometimes it's just one definition, or of very similar definitions that would kind of fit into a category. So, and we're not going to go through this in detail because there's quite a few pages for this chapter, but the first group is what I called an God, I really hate this preposition. The first group is an abstract medium that is a cause or source. I know. You can't get much more abstract than that. That's why I hate this preposition. But that's literally as clear and specific as I could explain this group. I couldn't find a better, more accurate way to describe it. I tried. I really tried. So it's an abstract medium. So a medium would be something through which something else flows or operates. Skull. I know I'm a failure because of this one thing. My entire life is a failure. But think of it, right? Like a spiritual medium, right? Is somebody who supposedly, contacts spirits, talks to ghosts or whatever. We call them a medium because you talk to the dead through the person, right? Or we talk about like TV, internet. These are mediums, which is why we say the media, right? Because media is plural. But TV is medium through which you can communicate or watch something or whatever it is. Communicate, I'm thinking news. Okay. So an abstract medium that's a cause or source. So not just any medium, but it's abstract. It's not a physical medium. And it's a cause or source of something else. Okay. So for example, this book was written by my father. Okay. So my father is the medium, right? It's like the words, the thoughts, it went through him into the book. Right? So that's why in English we say this, book or this movie is by somebody because it sort of came through them into existence. We also have the expression by hand, which is not exactly the same, but it's like how are you doing? Are you typing it or are you like writing it by hand? That could be the medium, but that could also just be like the way. Okay. I'm excited by the prospect of living in Japan. So how did I explain that one? Yeah, and these are passive voice, or this is passive voice, right? So the active voice would be the prospect of living in Japan excites me. So notice we use by in the passive voice because since we're making it passive, right? We're saying through that thing, this happens. Like instead of let's see here. Okay, instead of saying I dropped the ball, obviously that happened because of me. Like I had the ball and I dropped it. Okay. But if I say the ball was dropped by me, now I'm talking about the ball, but the ball didn't do anything. It was through me that the ball dropped, right? That's why we use by with the passive voice because we're looking at it from sort of the opposite direction. Let's see. I don't want to go through all of these. By nature, I'm very calm by nature. So, like, how am I normally, right? What is the way that I normally am? So my nature is the thing that abstractly flows through me. I'm the medium, you know. Yeah, these are really hard to describe. I just recorded my ASA. Okay, yeah, I'll check that out in a second. Group 2 is a mode or method, which is a more specific version. These are more specific words for way, because through the book I tried to give you some more specific words like, that's annoying, like when I talk about endpoint for the logic of two, a destination or a recipient of like a letter or something, those are more specific, context specific words for endpoint. So a mode or a method is like a more context specific word for way or path. Group 2 is also a concrete medium, not an abstract medium. So you can travel all around the world by plane. Okay, so that's the mode, the way that I travel, right? We have that expression. We walked to the beach by foot. You can also say on foot for a different reason, but by foot. Are you paying by cash or credit? I learned how to sing by watching videos online. Okay. That's the point I am at and recorded with, oh, not putting too much effort. Okay. Yeah, I'll come back to that in a second. I don't want to lose the by. Proximity. Group 3 is proximity, meaning that something is close to something else. Okay, so this is what I was talking about physically, like I live by the school. Notice it's proximity. So the idea there, the reason why it can be physically next to, or it can be just sort of like in the area, is because of proximity. If you're going along a path or along a line, you know, that depending on the scope, again, the United States would be a larger scope. But to keep it simple, if my house is here and the school is here and you walk along the line, you're going to be in the area of where my house is and where the school is. So if I say my house is by the school, then that's the path. That's the way. If you go that way, if you go that path, that direction, you're going to pass by or be around the other object as well. I live by the beach. He drove by us. That one is sort of the proximity in motion, right? As one person is going slower than the other. So again, I took painstaking efforts to try to describe all these. I'm not doing all that here. So if any of this is confusing and way too abstract for you, it's in the book. Since David is asking this, I know you have my book digitally because I sent it to you as a patron. So you can look that up if you want to learn more. A passage of time. So group 4, a passage of time. That's time, by with time. A passage of time with a strict endpoint, meaning limit point. So turn in the report by Friday. Okay. Meaning no later than Friday. I'll be home by 7, no later than 7. Now you can think of that as you go through the path forward in time, right? You're reaching a particular hour or a particular day, right? By Monday, or by next month, a particular month, right? That's the end point. You're not going to go past that. But as you go through that path, you're getting closer and closer. You're becoming nearer and nearer, right, to that point. And so it's sort of a special use of by. And actually, is there a better way I explained that? Yeah, so by really emphasizes the endpoint itself, or not by, to emphasizes the endpoint itself. I give it to him, or I work Monday to Friday. But by is kind of like the path between the 2 points from now until the deadline, right? So we still have this idea of time, of a path, and we even have phrases like the passage of time. Right? Passage is something that you can travel through. Group 5 is a measurement, often a rate, which is a specific type of measurement. So I get better at English day by day. I get better at English by the day, same thing. I'm paid by the hour. Stock prices rose by 40%. So how much? Notice how, way. How is very much tied to way or path. this room measures 15 by 18. This one took me forever to try to explain. And I'm not even going to talk about that one right now. And then there's some phrasal verbs as well. So going back to the point at hand here, now that we know all the groups. So first, let's actually talk about the easier one. To live by the book. Okay, so that means that, right, there may or may not be a physical book. It's just, what are the rules? How are things supposed to be ideally, right? Do you do something by the book, by the rules? So it's according to. Now notice when we say according to something, we're saying it is in line with something. That's another way to say the same thing. See, these prepositions are they're tied together under the surface, in line. So according to, in line with. So if you do something by the book, you are doing something according to what the book says. You are doing something in line with the rules in the book, right? And that line is a path that you can walk on, right? So you're following those rules. Notice we say follow the rules. You follow a path, right? You continue walking down a particular path. All of these words are connected under the surface. This is the magic of my discovery. That's why I say I didn't invent this, right? The more and more that I think about things like this, and the more that I try to explain sentences that I haven't thought of or cases that I haven't thought of, number one, I don't find any exceptions. I find cases that are really hard to describe sometimes, or that I need more time to think about. But I keep finding these under the surface connections, even with words that aren't prepositions, like follow the rules, follow the path, right? There's a reason why we say follow the rules, because live by the book. They're tied together in the mind of a native, just we're not conscious of it. And in your language, it could be that you have the exact same thing, right? Some languages have the exact, not all the exact same webs of connections, but very similar expressions or the same expression. And some of the webbing between languages, especially if they're relatively similar, like, say European languages, you're going to have a lot of similar connections under the surface. But then you go to something like Japanese or Chinese or, whatever, and you're still going to have some similar connections, right? Because some things like fire hot, that's a universal. I don't think anybody would associate fire with cold, at least not automatically. So, but outside of that, depending on, what type of phrases and whatnot are going on under the surface in a particular language, you're going to get different webs and connections, like I was talking about with Russian dogs. Okay, now back finally to answer by gosh, by golly. You can see why this is very abstract. By the book is not too difficult, right? That one, that is pretty straightforward, I think, once we have the basic idea, like as a path or a way. But by gosh, by golly, so it really doesn't make any sense on the surface. It really doesn't. Gosh and golly are just kind of like family-friendly filler words. I mean, we wouldn't use cuss words in that case. It's just they're these expressions that the words themselves actually don't actually contain the meaning. It's more about the by. So it's like in line with gosh, in line with golly, because gosh and golly are kind of like wow, right? Like gosh, that's amazing, or gosh, I didn't think that, or golly, that's brilliant, whatever. As I said, we don't really use golly that much anymore, unless you're older. But because the meaning of these words is kind of like wow, it's like in line with wow, like along the path of wow, and it's very abstract. Like, what does that even mean? On the path of wow. But if you think about it in the context of the song, right? So it's time for mistletoe and holly, right? Okay, it rhymes. And it's like it's Christmas, right? It's Christmas, and he's saying like wow, it's Christmas. Look at it's mistletoe, it's holly. Like the seasons are changing. Everybody's cheerful. It's like, oh wow. So it's the spirit of the season. It's inspiring and amazing. By gosh, by golly. So I hope that makes sense of what it means and why we say it, or why we don't say it outside of the sentence. And hopefully I did a good job at that, of explaining that. And my biggest hope is that you agree with me that it's very logical, even if it is very abstract. Yeah, at least it makes sense, if nothing else. Okay. I kind of feel like everybody left. I know there are 6 people here because it tells me there are 6 people, but it feels like I just kind of was like talking, and like nobody said anything for a little while, and it's just like, wow, you should analyze more Christmas songs. No, no, you just want to torment me by getting Christmas songs stuck in my head. But then YouTube would, very nice contraction. We would never write that contraction, by the way. YouTube would start. YouTube would start. Yeah, it's actually a little hard to say, but yeah, YouTube would start to target you. Yes, exactly. Actually, in this case, because it's kind of hard to go from the B to the D, the way that we would pronounce that in speech, again, we wouldn't really write that contraction. We'd put a schwa there. YouTube'd. Or that could actually be a high schwa. YouTube'd YouTube would start to target you. Yeah. It's because they're both stop sounds. So it's kind of hard for it to go, right? Okay. Am I missing anything? Did anybody say anything else? Oh yes, Sedent, you sent a recording to me. I knew there was something. And I really wish I could play my audio through the computer. But I can't while I'm using the YouTube webcam. Let's see here. Messages. Let's see how you did. Of course, anybody who's here, feel free to leave questions, comments, tell me I'm crazy for thinking prepositions are logical. Dun, dun, dun. God damn it, it's in my head again. Okay. I really hate how in Patreon, if I'm in the messages and I click on a link, it doesn't open in a new tab. And then I end up closing it and I'm like, where'd my Patreon tab go? Okay. Let's see. Interesting recording. Okay. The interesting thing about this recording, so as you go through the recording, you're kind of like not, you're sort of like a little more silent, right? Like you're not speaking as loudly. As you go through the recording, it kind of gets louder, but the sound also gets a little clearer. Um, and the quality of the sound gets better as you go through the recording. By the time you say the last "eh," it sounds, I would probably say perfect, if not just about. Like I'm actually not sure if there's anything wrong with that, so might as well not be. But the first one, I definitely hear a bit of an E, just a little tiny bit of an E. It's still in there. So I don't know if you're aware that you're making a little change there. Eh, 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 eh. Yeah, that last one, I give you like 99.8. It's so close. It's so very, very close. Compared to the last recording you sent me, by the end of this recording, not the start of this recording, it sounds better. This is sort of like that perfect, when I said, like, you said the sound perfectly, and then the recording after that, and this one is kind of like in between. So you're moving back towards it, which is good. That's good. I love how I see things in my head, because that's what's allowed. That's, I can't speak, of course, English because I just teach it. I don't speak it. But um, no problem. The way that I'm able to explain things to you guys, and like the reason why I use my hands is, like I say, oh, the L is like this, like just the way that I do things, it's because it's how I'm seeing it in my head. So like when I say, oh, the L isn't like this, it's like just a little bit flat, you know. The way that I describe it, all I'm trying to do is physically show you with my hands exactly what I'm picturing inside my mouth. And when I'm listening to a recording like from Cedent here, and I'm really trying to listen to the quality, not only do my ears hear, or not only do my ears try to hear what's going on, but my brain also visually, I can't speak. It's been 2 hours. We're done. um, my brain visually sees what is going on in my mouth if I were to try to reproduce what he's saying. And it's not always immediate and automatic. I might have to kind of try to shadow it a little bit to find the exact quality of what's going on. But um, that's how my brain works. And that's apparently why I'm decent at this job. Even like the vowel chart, like I had a student where they kept, for some reason, between the schwa, the high schwa, and the fifth vowel. So and ah. He was having trouble with those three. Please say or imitate me. Uh, well, it would be nice if people could actually hear the audio. um, but I can go ahead and do that to where you can hear me, even if you can't hear the audio. I'll do that in a second. But when I'm still going to take your recordings to do that analysis video that I was talking about. And in that, I think I'm going to try to shadow you in my analysis video to kind of give people a little bit of, you know, a visual of how I would shadow, even though I'm shadowing the incorrect thing, but it's still shadowing. I'm trying to mimic you so I can figure out exactly what you're doing. But I had a student who he was having trouble with those three sounds, and what he was doing is he was consistently getting like halfway, or like pretty much like the halfway point between all three sounds. It was really weird, and I don't know why. And so in my head, as he's like saying these sounds, because we were playing some games with it where I had to guess what he was saying. As he's saying these sounds, like in my head, if it's like say halfway between like the schwa and ah, like in my head, I see the vowel chart and I see the exact position. It's like halfway between the two. Or if it's like a little closer to the schwa, then I'll see the vowel chart and it'll be like, you know, 3/4 of the way to the schwa and a line between the schwa and the fifth vowel. Because I'm so used to the vowel chart at this point that like I can just see the chart and I can also feel how my mouth would do the same thing, which allows me to give people feedback. That's sort of my superpower. But anyway, yeah, so I'll go ahead and try to do this really quick for Cedent. Listen to it once. Okay. Eh, 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 eh. No, that's not quite right. Eh, 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 eh. Yeah, see, and I can even feel like maybe it's just the way I'm doing it, but it kind of feels like when you first start it. Oh yeah, I just remembered your comment from earlier. It feels kind of like when you first start it, like the sound is. It's like it's forward enough, but it's a little too high and maybe a little bit curved here. And then as you go through each of the times, because you say it 4 times, it feels kind of like you're shifting back a little bit, um, which is weird because you would think that that would not make the sound clearer, but it could be because of something you're changing with the exact physical shape of the tip of your tongue. But that could just be me. I don't know. Yeah, I was going to mention this earlier and I forgot. And now do yours versus mine. What do you mean? Do yours versus mine? Oh, okay. If I can, let me see. Okay, it was okay. So mine would I'll do mine and then I'll try to do yours. Hopefully I'll hit it when I want to. It's a very subtle difference. You're like so close. um, eh, 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 eh. I don't even know if you hear a difference there, but there was a difference. It's literally like a microscopic, like, I don't know, millimeter, not even millimeter change. And I'm changing a little bit of the tenseness on the tip of my tongue. That's one thing I feel. It's a very, very micro change. Um, that's why I say you're so super close. It's just you don't have the right quality. I think your position is pretty much spot on. You just don't have the right quality because if you're down to where like you're not up into the E position, so you're kind of down a little bit more, um, but you have the tongue shape of E, it will still sound like an E, right? So if I'm instead of saying E, I kind of go down to but I use sort of like this type of shape, eh, E, E, E. All I did there was take the very front part of my tongue and kind of bend it a little bit, but I'm in the position, the second vowel. So this is what I was going to say earlier, and I forgot because I got sidetracked by something else. um, when it comes to the the exact position, the exact what's the word I'm looking for? Not position in this case. Shape, the exact tenseness, the exact, all the little details of your tongue, not just like the height and everything. We know it's on the front of the tongue, but the exact way that you put your tongue can create that interference. And what I would actually say, David, why did you delete comments? Don't delete the comments. I didn't get to read them. Now I don't know what they are. See this, I get distracted. um, like I'm saying, so if you have a bit of a curve down like this, it's going to sound even just slightly like an E. Okay. And that's something that my ears might not necessarily pick up. It's just like I hear a bit of an E, but I don't know why. Right? It could be because you're too high. That's exactly what I'm going through. Exactly what I was trying to do, but that's not the sound. So, well, see, now I don't know what David is going through because the messages were deleted. I'm so sad. Okay. Anyway, I'm itchy too, apparently. Um, with the here's the great thing about the I think I mentioned this in the main lesson. Maybe I didn't. Oh, see, I don't know if I should say that I or a because there are English words where ay could be pronounced either way. um, and then with the comma or with the apostrophe, I'm not sure what the apostrophe is there for. I guess it's a without the glide. I don't know. I'm confused now. Okay, whatever. With the I got to focus on here. um, having the tip be down a little bit is going to cause an interference to make it sound more like an E. Okay, that's one thing you want to avoid. But yeah, no problem. It's not your fault. I'm the one who's getting distracted. Um, oh, A without the glide. Okay. But the exact tongue position, it could be flat because earlier you mentioned like you felt like it was kind of flat or something like that. And that's fine. Yeah, it wants to be like either sort of completely flat, right, where you definitely need to make sure you're down enough, at least with your tongue, not necessarily your jaw. Because then if it's completely flat and you're too high, it's gonna sound. It's not gonna sound like E or I, but it's gonna sound more like an E. So you don't want it to be too high. But you can also do this. Okay, this is another way to do it. You can actually take the tip and point it slightly upwards. As long as you keep the sound here on the front, don't let it roll back. You can do it that way too. You probably can't see my tongue, but eh, 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 eh. Right there, I just said it 4 times, and all I did, I put my tongue like this, 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 and there actually wasn't really much difference in sound. Why? I don't know. I didn't really hear any difference. Maybe you did, but as just make sure that your tongue isn't doing this, because if it starts curving down, that's when you're going to run into problems. So I would probably keep that in mind as you continue practicing. Maybe try to compensate by bringing it up a little bit instead of keeping it more flat. Just kind of maybe bring the tip up slightly, very, very slightly, not up like that, but just up a little bit, and keep the sound in the front. Don't let it slide. That might correct your problem. Okay. I totally know what you mean. I hate the lax versions of tense vowels, but the and the high schwa are tricky. Things. I feel like that needs addressing, but I'm not sure how to address it. Okay, so A without the glide. A without the glide. One recording I did use A without the glide. A with I'm not even wait, hold on. Maybe my brain just isn't working here, but so like if I said for example like instead of way, like way, way, like the tongue doesn't actually like it doesn't really seem like it's moving between the two because it's such a small little shift. Is that what we're talking about? Okay. Glad I was able to figure that out. Yay me. That makes sense. Way, 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 way. Okay, it's not that there's no glide, at least the way that I would describe it. I don't know what's technically accurate or whatever. Maybe, a scientist would tell you different, but the way that I feel it and the way that I would describe it, it's not that there's no glide. It's that the glide is so microscopic that it seems like there's no glide. Because in my tongue, I have very good tongue feeling ability that I developed through Spanish. Um, and I think that was mostly through the R because it's such a hard sound to make. Um, but I wasn't consciously aware how my tongue felt before that. It was only after doing Spanish for a while and focusing on the pronunciation, I was like, oh, hey, like I can really feel my tongue now. And then I started teaching English and I could feel my tongue even more. So the more you practice, the more you try to become aware of what your tongue is doing, the more you will start to feel it. Some people, maybe it kind of won't ever manifest, but it's something that I think will develop for most people if you keep at it. When I try to do like A without the glide, I do feel a movement. I feel a very slight shift. It's more like a change in tenseness, and it's a very very small movement, but it's not like A where it's a very clear movement. Um, let's see. I also mentioned it sounded like a quick letter without the glide, or kind of the A cutting the sound. Oh, R, yeah. Or kind of weird cutting the sound. Yeah, I remember you mentioned something about that before, and I think I was kind of confused about that because I was like, "What?" It's definitely not ah. It's way too far down. A letter as a oh, something like a quick A letter. Yeah. Duh. Yeah. Because we're talking about see, I tell you guys to focus on the sounds. I do that too. My brain completely glossed over the fact that it said a letter, not a vowel sound or whatever. Um, so it's the name of the letter, yeah. Um, mm, I see. I see. Yeah. A, 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 a. Yeah, it's a really small little change. That's why this guy made up. Yeah, exactly. There you go. So, um, yeah, which if for whatever reason anybody, of course this is Patreon, so anybody who's not Patreon, you'd have to join Patreon for this, but um, anybody who does the Skype meetup, which will not be a regular thing, right? We'll do it now and then, maybe at some point in the future, not like, a year from now. It could be sooner than that, but it's not a regular thing. Anybody who attends the Skype meetups, you don't have to have the camera on, especially if you have like connection issues with your internet or whatever. Just in case if anybody's like a little uncomfortable and they're like, like that's totally fine. But of course, if you want feedback on, how your mouth is moving, because that's a component that I can also help you with to make you sound better, then I will need to see your mouth. But I'll try to do quick A without the glide, and then say the I vowel, like side by side. A I, A I, A I, A I, A I, A I, A I. Very different. Obviously, the end of the A position is supposed to be I, but it doesn't sound like it. A, 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 A. Yeah, I guess what we're doing, I have to find a way to describe that. Okay, yeah, now I see why you describe it as cutting it. Because I think what's happening when we don't do the glide is we start in that F position, not the third vowel, but the first part of the diphthong that we don't have as a monophthong, the little lowercase e. We're starting there, although it could actually be a little lazy, a little farther down. But we're starting there, and we start to make the motion a very small little like tenseness motion towards I, and then we just stop. Yeah. And so we don't complete the motion up to I. So for the quick version, what I guess I would call it the lazy version, going back like I talked a couple weeks ago about like the ranges and qualities of sound, this would be like a lazy, not clearly enunciated A. And all it takes is that little starting to move towards I that will allow us to hear it as the diphthong, and then we can move on. That's something that can be very tricky to master. And technically, this is one point that I would say you don't have to master to sound natural. It's a way that we can sort of hit the minimal amount of sound for it to be recognizable, and maybe we can speak even faster because of that. But that's like super fast speed. Otherwise, it's just kind of like lazy, like we're just speaking lazily, but still just clearly enough. And you don't have to go that unclear to still sound natural. So I would, unless you have a reason, obviously because English is dynamic, we're actually going in and out of clear enunciation all the time. When I'm talking to you guys here in the live streams, I'm a little bit more free flowing and whatnot. But you'll also hear me sometimes enunciate certain things, and that's because I still am consciously or otherwise aware that at least some of the people watching, maybe they can't understand me at super fast speed, and I should, maybe kind of slow down here and there a little bit. But even in regular everyday speech, if I'm talking to somebody, I don't usually pay attention to it, but when it's needed, or if it just happens to come out in a more enunciated way, that's possible. Not likely, but possible. But when it's needed, to repeat something or to show more emotion or to emphasize a point, that clear enunciation very dynamically emerges out of the flow of the rhythm and the sounds. And getting down to the minimal amount required to still just clearly enough hear the sound, I don't think you have to be that native to still sound perfectly native. That's like an extreme minimal case. So yeah. So I wouldn't worry too much about like trying to completely master, like say the lazy A. If you kind of just like don't complete the I, make sure that you start making the motion toward it, but don't complete the I, like say like A. It's like partially there. That's going to be perfectly sufficient to still sound perfectly natural. It's no problem. So you don't have to be so hard on yourself on that point, I don't think. But when it comes to the monophthongs, like yes, we obviously, as I said, it's not necessarily a pinpoint. There's sort of a range to it, but you have to be clearly in that range. And again, sedent, I think the problem you're having with it's not necessarily so much about being in the range or not. I think you're in the range. It's just that there's something else with your tongue where it's affecting the quality of the sound. And I think maybe that's where you should put a little bit more focus and play with that and see what happens. And see, this is why I was telling you guys before, I think this idea of like the quality of a sound can be so super useful. I'm still trying to figure out the exact ways that it can be useful, which is one reason I haven't made that really big lesson yet. Because it's still processing in my brain. It's such a huge idea, but yeah, especially when you're trying to train your tongue. Like your ears are one thing, that's relatively easy to fix, for the most part. But getting your tongue, getting that physical position down, knowing the idea of range and quality, to where like maybe your position is good. It's just, there's a certain tenseness off with, like maybe the back of your tongue is too tense and that's creating a distortion in the quality of the sound, but everything else is perfect. So it's not just about the position, it's also about the quality. Um, I can hear the difference when you said it. Good. That's a perfectly good sign. If you're sometimes you'll be able to physically produce it and not hear it, which is a very strange case. That's not as common, but I've seen that happen before. Usually your ears will get it and then your mouth will get it. But as long as your ears can get it, that means that you're better able to potentially correct yourself and you don't need as much feedback. Which, by the way, recording yourself and listening back to your recording, especially if you're trying to shadow on top of or repeat after, say, like a recording from me, like that can give you actually your brain some distance and you can actually hear yourself better. So you might want to try that as well if you're not sure. But when you said quick A and A. Okay. So your ears are probably fine. It's just you still got to play with your tongue a little bit. That really is the hardest part. It's, and I know you have a comment here, David. I'm gonna get to that here. The ears, like you're not moving your ears, right? You're getting input of sound, and yes, your brain has certain pathways and whatever to be able to hear, the barriers. I was going to say the lines between sounds and stuff, and you kind of have to tweak that a bit through minimal pairs and whatever. But you're not actually moving your ears. You're kind of just perceiving the sound. Where with your tongue, you have to physically not just get into the right position, but make sure that you're not too tense here and there, whatever, blah blah blah. And that's why it can get a lot more difficult, and why you usually need more feedback, because you might be doing the basic things right, but there's just something a little bit off in another aspect of your mouth. Maybe with the lips, maybe you're not open enough, whatever it is, or maybe you're too open in your mouth. So yeah, that's the hard part. Just like learning how to play the guitar, right? It's the physical placement and maneuvering of the instrument, because this is your instrument, your mouth. Okay, by the way, speaking of A, why does the IPA transcribe IPA? Let's talk about the IPA. I was talking about the IPA last. I can't even. I pay. I pay. I was talking about the IPA. Yeah, I was talking about the IPA last time, and why I hate it. But why does the IPA transcribe as lowercase e capital I, lowercase e and capital I? Yeah, sit, hit, vid when it's clearly. Okay, let's talk about this. um okay, so your example sit hit vid, that's just for the capital I symbol, right? Not for the with the lowercase e. Since we don't have the lowercase e as a monophthong, we wouldn't have any words with it. I'm assuming that's just to clarify. um, so basically, then your question would be, why does it transcribe it like the eh, which is like eh, the third vowel, plus eh, when you say it's clearly eh and the y consonant. Okay. In this particular case, according to my perception, I would actually side with the IPA on this. But this is also kind of a problem with the IPA. As you know, right? I don't have to tell you because I've already said it many times. Yep, it's the example. Okay, good. I've mentioned it many times, and I will mention it many times again. We want to focus on the ears. The IPA at best is a crutch that you can check just in case if you're not sure. But if you train your ears properly, you don't need the IPA anymore because you can hear all the sounds. Okay. This is why I don't think the IPA is particular. This is the main reason why I don't think the IPA is very useful, except as a short-term thing to maybe help get you started. And then again, really just with the vowel sounds on the vowel chart. Even then, I'm considering taking the IPA off my vowel chart. The only reason I have them on there is because the IPA is commonly taught. And for students who already have learned about the IPA and they see my vowel chart, they'll say, oh, okay, I'm familiar with these symbols. But I sent you another recording. Okay. Let's talk about this because this could just be a perception thing, but let's talk really quick about E, E, and the Y consonant. I'm sure you've seen my lessons, the few couple of lessons where I talked about this in I think the second main linking lesson, but I've mentioned it here and there as well. What I call the small Y many times, yeah. Good. The small Y. And there's also the small w, the small w. And the reason I call it small is for a reason. So this is also part of this discussion. There's a full y consonant, and then there's the small y consonant sound, which is more of a connection, which can happen also inside of words. So we have these four basic things. And actually, see, the idea of range and quality also comes in here. The more I explore this, the more I know this is going to be a useful lesson for you guys whenever I put all these pieces together for that concept. But okay, E is a vowel, I is a vowel, and Y, as you probably know, because I know, well, as far as I gather, you are you're more linguistically educated than the average person. So you probably know that the Y and the W are referred to as semivowels or semivowels. They could be semi, it doesn't matter, but semivowels. And I don't really like that term, but the more I've thought about it, I'm actually kind of coming around to the term because of this problem and because of the small Y connection. The E is right, we have front teeth, top of the mouth. The E is up in here, right? The I is a little bit lower, and the tongue shape is, might change a little bit. But that's basically it. E, I, we're using the front part of the tongue. This is the top part here. We have a bump, right, little bump, and then there's the part that starts going up and back. That part, in English at least, I don't know about the placement in all languages, because sometimes the consonant placement will change slightly for different languages. But yeah, yeah sounds like if E is right here, yeah feels like it's like right here, right? And I feel like there's a little bit bigger dip in my tongue. It's kind of like pushing down a little bit more, but it's like just behind the E. And if we go into like a full clear sound, we're also going to sort of do this, like yeah, where it almost sort of like waves out of that position. So it has a little bit of a motion to it, but that also depends on the flow and whatnot, if it's clearly enunciated or not. And of course, we're not talking about cases where things are spelled with a Y, but they're actually not pronounced with a Y. It might be an E sound like happy. Okay, that's not a Y sound, that's an E sound. That's just spelling. But the E and the Y actually sound extremely similar. You could even potentially argue that the Y consonant sound, the semivowel consonant Y, is like a slightly different quality E. It's not the same sound. It's definitely not the same quality, but you could potentially argue that it's like the same sound, just slightly different. Kind of like Sedent is experiencing between the English e and the Hindi e. I made a slight modification. Sedent, tell me if that sounded correct. I haven't practiced that. I just I'm picturing it on the vowel chart and I try to move it back a little bit. That's why year is a difficult word. Yes, exactly. That's why year is difficult because you have to go from y to e. So you actually have to move from sort of like right here and actually move it forward. Y, y, y. And I actually feel my tongue sort of sliding forward into the e. Year, year. Nope, sounded the same to me. Okay. Well, I made a little change and I heard a little change, but apparently it wasn't big enough for it to be the right sound in Hindi or the right quality because it is the right same IPA letter. Anyway, the I, at least to me as a native speaker, right? If you don't have I in your language, then it probably sounds basically like almost like an E anyway. But to me, E and I are in most cases clear as like day and night. They're two very different sounds, but they are very similar in position. And we know that if we're talking about connections, like if I say be, I don't know, try to think of one that's not complicated. All the complicated ones come to my mind. Be honest. Okay, be honest. So honest starts with an H, but it's a silent H, right? So we're going to ah, the fifth vowel. That's the O there. And we're going be honest. Yeah, yeah. So what I'm doing there is I'm starting up here with the E, but instead of just saying like be ah, I'm sort of letting my tongue, do a slight little change to the y, and then continue to open from there. So I'm not just opening straight into ah, I'm sort of doing that little change on the way. Yeah, yeah. So it's going back a little bit from the E before it opens up. And that gives us what I call the small y because it doesn't sound, it's not biya, right? Be honest. That would be like a fully enunciated y, and that's not correct. So I call it the small y or the small y because we just sort of hear that y there. It's like the perception of it is there, and physically, we are sort of gliding through it, but it's not a full, clear, enunciated sound as if it were supposed to be part of the word, right? It's not honest. Of course, if you're going from E to a word that starts with Y, like, I don't know, be yes. I don't know, be yes. Don't be no, be yes. Which actually kind of sounds like BS. But if we say BS, obviously there's already a Y there, and it's just the Y is probably going to sound a little bit more pushed out, a little more articulated. Unless we're speaking quickly and lazily, then maybe it'll also sound kind of small. But that's a speed thing. Speed changes the quality slightly. With the I, which I don't think we really have any words that end in I, but the diphthong A and I end in I, right? So if we say day of, okay, we're going to get that same small y, day of, day of. So I'm actually going from to I, and then up to y, and I'm making a slight little change in my tongue, day, day. So I kind of just keep gliding up, make this little change in my tongue, and then go down into the schwa, day of, day of, day of, day of. Day, 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 day. And in fact, as I close from from to I up to Y, what I feel is as I go into that Y, I pass through the second vowel I, and my tongue actually kind of moves forward a little bit. It actually doesn't move back. It kind of goes like this, straight up, if nothing else, but kind of maybe a little bit forward as the tongue curves into the Y sound, and then it'll go into the schwa. So we kind of like shoot past the I sound there as we flow through the word into the next word. But we get a small y there. Now, of course, day is spelled with a Y at the end, but it's not a Y sound, right? It's the A diphthong. But we do get a small Y in this case between the two words. Now, that small y could be extremely, extremely small. And if I'm really clearly enunciating, I could say like day of, day of. As long as I don't stop my voice, you're going to hear kind of a y quality. But if I say like the day of, for some reason I say it that way, then obviously we don't hear a little y, right? It's going to stop at eh, even though it sounds like it's going too far because the diphthong makes it sound like it's a little deeper than eh, but it's not. Not quite anyway. Okay, So basically, the whole point of what I'm trying to say here is, so in your perception, you would say that a more accurate way to transcribe the a diphthong would be to use the lowercase e, which we don't have as a monophthong in English, plus the symbol for the y, which I guess in IPA would be j. So it should be like this. If it were transcribed that way, I mean, as an approximation, because I think the lowercase e with the capital I for like the second vowel, I think that's already just an approximation anyway. Um, because both, like, two languages could have the and could have the and maybe even have the diphthong a. Um, but the exact quality might be different between two languages. Like, as I was saying with sedent, we discovered that Hindi has the second vowel just like English does, except he can't say it in the way that English, well, he can, but he's having trouble consistently reproducing the English quality of the sound, even though it's the same IPA symbol and it's just slightly farther back on the chart, if I remember the placement right, but it's the same symbol. So again, at best, the IPA and the vowel charts, these are approximations, right? There is no exact pinpoint. There's a pinpoint quality, I think, and there's a range of quality that would be interpreted as the proper sound and not sounding like an accent. And you're just trying to get into that range and get as close to that pinpoint quality as you can. But as far as a pinpoint position, I don't think there is one. It's really more about the quality than the position. But obviously, the position is also important. See you then, don't erase messages. No, it's fine. You can do whatever you want. Don't you think a vowel is difficult to say in isolation because it's never in the end of words? At the end of words, we would say at the end. We say at the start, in the middle, at the end. Because think of it like a container. So you have the start of the container, the end of the container. You're not in it, right? It's at specific points, or like a line, right? But if you're in the middle, right, it's like you're inside that container. But anyway, don't you think a vowel is difficult to say in isolation because it's never? You know, that's an interesting question. You would think that it would be difficult to say in isolation. Let's see, even German has this vowel sound, but if you hear them say it, it's not even close to English. Yeah, my German's really rusty. If I remember right, they do have the sound. Portuguese has the sound too, but it's slightly different. Let me see here. German IPA vowel chart. One thing that I think the IPA is useful for is if you are learning more than one language and you want to quickly and easily see what sounds are in common between the languages you know and the language that you're learning. It's like a quick, easy visual reference. Even if the quality and the exact position is a little bit different, you'll know that a very, very similar sound is, which is essentially the same sound, is there, and you just have to sort of capture the exact quality based on that language, if there's a difference. But let me see here. Yeah, they have as ist, of course. Okay, that's something that I never see. I don't remember. I don't know. This sounds vaguely familiar, but there's a slightly different quality to it. Let me see. See, because the IPA, that's the whole thing. Yeah, and if I play, so I went to German IPA, right, on Wikipedia, and I clicked on the capital I, which is the second vowel sound in English, right? And then it takes me to a page and it has a recording of the sound in isolation, which is the recording for just the sound, not in German, but just the sound. And if I play that sound, it does not sound almost anything like, it sounds kind of close, but it does not sound like the English to me. This is another reason why I don't like the IPA, because it's maybe it's just not accurate enough, or it doesn't take into account the quality of the sound. Um, yeah, this is a really important idea. I definitely need to flesh that idea out more. And do you think British is same as American I? Good question. I never consciously really noticed much difference. Let's see if I. So my British accent is probably like a mix. Like if I went to Britain, they'd probably be like, "What are you doing?" But if I try to speak in my British accent, or a British accent of sorts, how would I? Let's see if I say, "Is it on the table? Is it on? What's on the telly?" Uh, put it in the box, in the box, in. See, I kind of, when I do a British accent, I want to make it closer to E. That's probably not right, but maybe it is. I want to say like put it in the box, but it's probably the same as American English. I don't know. Um, I would have to like really listen to a British speaker speak, and even then, there's actually a lot of regional differences in British pronunciation. It's not just like there's like received pronunciation and there's Cockney, but then there's like a bunch of others. Like there's actually a lot of variation in just England, let alone the UK. Um, okay, I believe the I and high schwa are the same. Wait, but the fourth vowel is completely different. Also, their ah sounds is more like o. I'm so confused now. The I and high schwa are the same. What do you mean they're the same? Like the same sound? That doesn't make any sense. Um, ugh, I'm getting lost in the comments. Listen to this British vowel. Which British vowel? Do you have a link? um, you can check the Wikipedia page for near open front unrounded vowel. Well, right here I have near close, near front unrounded vowel, which by the way, that's the other reason why I hate the IPA, because this is a useless name. This is an absolutely useless. I mean, sure, it gives you some. Okay, it's near close, near front. Okay, it gives you some idea of like the position, but that's so academic and abstract. Like that's why I call that one sound the high schwa, because it's just easy. um, I meant they sound like their American English counterparts. Oh, okay, hold on. Oh, I see. So the I in British English and American English and the high schwa in British English and American English are the same, but the fourth vowel is completely different. I actually also their ah sounds more like oh. What I know of British English, because I actually did a little bit of research on like how to speak with a British accent, just because I was curious before, and in just like regular received pronunciation, apparently, so there's the sound they do have the sound ah, and there are some words in American English and British English where we both use that same exact sound. I don't remember what I think cat is the same. Um, but then they have like ah, I think, which is supposed to be like what I call the fifth vowel, but it's more farther forward. And then of course they have aw, which sounds more like an o because they're using the lips. That's the British version of the unmerged cot merger. If my knowledge and memory are correct here. And so like they'll say like cot and cot, um, instead of cot, which mine's just like all the way in the back. I think that should be about right, but yeah, we do have the same fourth vowel, just not in all the same places. That's the difference. Okay, blah blah blah. So near open, near. I want to make sure I don't get lost in the comments here. Okay, yeah. So near open, front unrounded vowel. Near open, front unrounded vowel. And the Wikipedia search, it's right there. Oh, you mean the fourth vowel? Yeah, you could have just said the fourth vowel. Then again, I guess I can't look for that on Wikipedia. Interesting. Okay, now I know where the quality of your sound comes from, David. You seem to be mimicking that recording perfectly from when I heard you, when you sent me a recording before in the past, that sounds like exactly what I heard you say. And that is not the right sound. It's not quite. It is. It's the sound. It's just not the right quality of the sound. It doesn't quite sound like the English sound. Maybe when there's a nasal after it, like if you're saying "an," then it kind of sounds like maybe it's that version. If you raise the back a little bit, because I think if I remember right, that's the feedback I gave you, is to maybe like lower the back of your tongue a little bit and see if that gives you a better sound. Um, so yeah, again, this is just another good reason for me to point to of why I don't like the IPA for English. Um, it's useful between languages, but again, it's just a quick reference tool. It like if I use the IPA to say go learn Mandarin Chinese, um, I'm going to use it as a quick reference to say, okay, approximately what are the sounds, especially vowel sounds, that are so similar that the IPA would use the same sound, right? Maybe the quality is a little different, but it's close enough. But I'm not going to stop there and say, oh, okay, this this is exactly the same as English, so I'm just going to use the same sound in Chinese or Mandarin. You could do that if you don't care about having like a perfect pronunciation or a near perfect pronunciation, because you'll probably be understood just fine, right? It's close enough. You'll just sound like you have like say the English accent version of that sound when you speak. What I would do, because I like to have really good accent if I'm going to learn a language. That's one of the reasons why I like learning a language in the first place, is because of the sounds. Um, I'm going to use that as an initial reference to gather what the sounds are, and then I'm going to actually listen to what is the actual quality I hear and try to match that quality, not from the IPA, but from actual Mandarin sources. Then if I see that same IPA symbol for German or for whatever other language, I'm not going to use the IPA source. I'm going to say, okay, how does this sound? What's the quality of the sound in German? And I'm going to mimic that. Okay. So the IPA, again, it's a crutch. It's a short-term stepping stone. It is not a tool to actually help. Well, it's a tool that can help in a way to improve your pronunciation, but it's not a tool to perfect and completely eliminate your pronunciation, because I don't think it's capable of that. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe my ears are just way off and I'm stupid and I'm horrible at my job. But, I'm pretty sure that my ears are good. So, but you never know. You could always be wrong about things. I always leave that possibility open. I might not completely agree on in high shot being the same. Listen to this British vowel. I meant they sound okay. The link is for British vowel sounds, and the first vowel is it at 1:30. I guess I don't see a link. Which link? When did we send this link? Was it a while ago? A while ago? Because I don't remember a link. I don't know if YouTube blocked it or something. You should try sending it again and see what happens. Because YouTube might have or did you send it in the chat or did you send it on Patreon? Because if you send it on Patreon, then I haven't looked at that. But yeah, I think YouTube does that. I might have an option enabled that blocks links that I'm not even aware of. Maybe it's just by default. If so, you can send me the link on Patreon. I'll get it there. But let's see here. Wow, we're already almost at 3 hours. It's crazy. Then could you listen to open front unrounded vowel? Whether that doesn't sound more like the American part. Yeah, see, right. I'm about to like unravel all of your your past effort, because you're going to be like, oh my god, I was trying to mimic all this stuff and it's not even accurate. Okay, let's see. Open front unrounded vowel. Okay, so this is the lowercase a. I guess this would be the fifth vowel. Just want to make sure, because sometimes these symbols look very similar. That's another reason. Some of these symbols look very, very similar. It's harder to remember them distinctly. Hat. hat. Okay, well, I would say that with the fourth vowel, hat. That's the example they give, or bra. Okay, yeah, so fifth vowel. Um, definitely not. God, that sounds like somebody is going to the dentist and they're experiencing pain. Like your mouth is open and the dentist is like on your tooth and you're like, ah, ah, ah. Like that does not, no. That doesn't even sound like the British version of the sound. Like I don't know what that is supposed to be. Um, I'm not even sure I would identify that as the same sound. That's so different. Let me see how they see the recording for this word. No, they don't. Of course not. Um, yeah. So, man. Okay, sent on Patreon. And so if you use the Wikipedia, does that make me sound like I have a horrible thick accent? Well, I would really have to listen to like the flow of your speech, which if we're going to do a Skype meetup, I'll definitely have a chance to do that. But let me see. Hypothetically, if like that was the only sound that really wasn't right and everything else was like close or perfect, I don't think it would give you a horrible thick accent. And if you're speaking quickly, maybe it might not stand out, but it would definitely affect how you sound. It might be okay enough to where they're just like, well, you don't really sound like you're a native, but I'm not really sure what's wrong. That could be the effect. Or if, because to my ears, things are going to stand out more than to the average speaker. Um, so you might be able to get away with it, but if you're clearly enunciating the sound, it's definitely going to stand out as not right. Um, they actually list Californian and Canadian English as dialects that might use. Ah, yeah, let me go back to that. English, California, Canadian. Yeah, yeah. So the thing about California English, so I'm from California, but that does not mean I speak California English because I do not. Um, in fact, there's a bit of variety in California. What and I could be wrong, but in my analysis of my speech and all the time I've spent with sounds and stuff, it seems to me that because in California English the O is a monophthong, not a diphthong. Like it is the monophthong in many other languages. It's a slightly different quality, especially with the lips, but it's usually a monophthong on the vowel chart. Where if you look at the general American vowel chart, you will not see O on there because as a monophthong, because it's supposed to be a diphthong between O as a starting position and the high schwa as the end position. And I can do it that way, but I also do it with O as a monophthong. And so I think that for whatever reason, growing up in California, I picked up the Californian O, but I don't really have much else of like a Californian accent. So I pronounce most other things like the vowels and stuff as Western slash general, which you weren't here last time. I actually found out in my research. I don't know if you're aware of this. Apparently, General American is an umbrella term that includes Western American. So that excludes Southern English. It excludes, certain Northeastern, like the Boston accent and things like that. And it excludes a little bit in the North where they're starting to have a vowel change. Like instead of they'll say yeah, like cat or something. I'm from Minnesota, that type of sound. Where yes, there's some regional variation in the general American territory, and there's some regional variation in the Western American territory, but there's only really like two, maybe three major differences in Western American compared to General American. And General Americans don't generally tend to notice the difference of Western American, and Western Americans don't generally tend to notice the difference in General American. And so because they're so very, very similar, the effect is actually what I'm teaching you, even without my hacks. Like if I were just to teach you straight Western American with like O as a diphthong, not like the California O or anything, um, it would match almost perfectly with General American. And I could even say that technically it's General American because it's under the same umbrella. It's just an easier version of General American. And then you add in my hacks, like the ing hack and the O as a monophthong and whatever else, that still allow you to sound natural. And there you go. It's even easier. So I'm biased, obviously, and I could be wrong, but I think that the way that I specifically teach English pronunciation and the way specifically that I speak is probably the single easiest and relatively least complicated version of English pronunciation on the planet. Very biased, very big statement there. I mean, I haven't heard all accents of English in the world, so maybe I could definitely be wrong there. But in my experience, it does seem to be the least complicated and easiest way, especially with the hacks that I give you that other teachers, I doubt they would if, whatever. So anyway, that's the case for English hacks, making the case for the four people who are here. So because and I mentioned that because I haven't seen him here, Amit. I haven't seen him in the comments yet. I don't know if he's watching, but last time he mentioned in a comment before that he wanted the neutral General American accent. And I started thinking about that, and so I started doing research on this, and that's where I discovered it's actually under the same umbrella. And so I was explaining to him last time because he was here that you can still learn Western American and have a neutral accent. It's just easier because you have the cot merger. You only have one sound instead of two. Even if you didn't use the California O, that's fine. And it's still neutral. But if you do use the California O, like I don't think anybody would really notice. Like I'm not saying "oh," like some other language because I'm still rounding my lips. Oh, 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 oh. That was a little bit weird on the first one. Oh, oh, oh. Sounds perfectly fine. So this idea that General American, as defined by like the middle of the country and all that, I would argue that maybe it's neutral, but if you call it neutral, it's not that much different than Western American anyway, and you would have to extend that neutrality to Western American. Not all regions, of course, but Western American as a general uh, large region of the country. So, anyway, talking. Okay, did I miss anything? Oh yeah, there's a link on Patreon that I have to look at. Refresh the page again because Patreon doesn't know how to use dynamic PHP loading. Okay. British pronunciation tips from BBC Learning English. An hour and 23 minutes. British pronunciation, BBC Learning English, standard Southern British English pronunciation. That's the title. Okay. Huh. Okay, and you said about 1:30. So I'm going to skip to 1:30 because, let's see. Okay, so the word this. This, this one. Or maybe 1:15. Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing the word this at 1:30. Let me go back to, I lost my tab. Okay, 150. Let's see. 150. Need samples. Eh. 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 Okay, listening very, very, very closely, like as closely as I can possibly do with my brain. I would say that there is a extremely subtle, slightly different quality that makes it sound a little bit British to me. But it's so extremely subtle and so small that uh yeah, I'm at 150. She's talking about the sound. It's so like when I heard her say this at 130, I was like, maybe there's something different there. I can't really quite tell. But when I hear her say the sound in isolation, if I wasn't paying attention to it, I wouldn't have noticed. Let's say that. Um, Even with my ears, I would not. It wouldn't stand out to me. Um, but because I'm really listening, I'm like, oh, okay, so that actually gives a little bit of the British accent. It's just a very slightly different quality, even smaller than the quality difference between what American English and the sound in Hindi. That's like a much bigger difference compared to the difference I'm talking about here. So it probably has something to do with the exact tenseness or shape of the tongue. I'm not even sure how I would repeat that. But I would say if we take the range of the second vowel in American English and we start pushing that range to where it's heading towards the line, possibly. But I really think it has a very slight little shift in the tenseness or shape of the tongue. That's probably what's giving it a little bit of different quality. Um, I sent you another link as well. Okay. Looking at links. Okay, and then what are we doing with this link? Oh, this is for American English. This person. I don't know who this person is. Okay. Is there a particular timestamp on this one, or I'm sure she'll launch into it pretty soon. I'm surprised you didn't send me a link on to Rachel's English, because from what I gather, she's kind of like the pronunciation teacher. That's usually like if my students find anything, they usually find it from her, and they'll send me links. Do, 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 do. Oh, she has minimal pairs. Very good. Good job. Very good. I like that. Okay. Another teacher that uses minimal pairs. That makes me very happy. Interesting. Okay. Huh. Yeah, I know that's what it is. I'm doing the ear training test right now. So far, her it and lip does sound a little bit off, a little bit different. Not off, but a little bit different. Let's see. Okay, it sounds 100% perfect. Absolutely 100% perfect. Yes. So the how she moves from L to E for whatever reason is maybe a little bit different than the way I do it because it sounds a little bit um, not wrong, but it just sounds a little bit different to me. Where when she says it sounds absolutely perfect the way I would say it. He's that's the other one. I don't want that one. Yeah, that's E. I don't want that one. Live. When she says live, that one, that A sounds perfect. Let's see. And I notice that I do that too when I'm doing the check out 115 or 145. What about is? Oh, you're talking about, did you send me another link for Rachel's? Yeah. Um, I notice that when I do the minimal pairs for you guys, um, that like as I'm listening back to the recording, I'll notice that the exact quality is actually kind of a little bit off, but it's within the right range. It doesn't sound like a different quality, like from a different accent or a different language or something. Um, so I guess maybe it's not so much the quality, but it sounds a little bit different than what I would imagine to be like the crystal clear perfect sound. And I don't notice that until I'm editing. So again, native speakers, they don't always hit a pinpoint position. There's a range. As long as we're in that range, my ears are usually good enough to pick up the subtle differences that, like, if you're, farther this, farther that, farther here inside the range. And that's one thing that allows me to give you such good feedback. So it's okay if you don't sound necessarily 100% perfect, as long as you don't sound like you have an accent. I need to flesh out the difference here between all these things. I'm still trying to figure this out. I hope David is still here. Yes, David is still here. What do you think about the pronunciation of this teacher, not Rachel's English? Now it lets you paste a link. Okay, so 145 and 505. Okay, so let me do this before I move on. Is this from that same the Keenan Rhodes 505? Because if you sent me another link, I didn't get it. 505. Oh, I see. Is, yeah. Let's see. Yeah, she says is 100% perfectly. 100% perfectly. So it is 100%. When she said live, 100%. For some reason, when she said lip, maybe it's because of the L and the P and just, I don't know, but she said it more than one time and it sounded exactly the same each time. So maybe it's just she said it a very slightly different way. But that's something that if I wasn't paying attention, I definitely would not have noticed at all. 145. Was that for it? See 145. No, it is 1. Oh, I didn't see 145. Yeah, 100% perfect. 100% perfect in isolation. No problem there. And that definitely sounds like a slightly different quality than the British one, right? So yeah, it's sometimes accents are made by big things, and sometimes they're made by very, very, very subtle things. So let's see here. I'm gonna go to this other link here. Short A. Yeah, she's from the north. Yeah, she's Debbie from Chicago. From Chicago. Yeah. Map. 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 Yeah, so when she does she goes into and then she pulls it back. Like instead of map, ma. It moves. The sound kind of sort of moves backwards a bit as she goes through to the P. That's definitely more of a northern sound, and northern in the context of the United States would not mean all of the northern states, because the Western American, of course, covers the whole West Coast, north to south. So that would be like the middle northern. Of course, there is some variation up in the Seattle area and in the Portland, Oregon, and stuff. There's a little bit of regional variation there, but that's Western American variation. Yes. So, and that's a good point, because, right, you don't have to speak like me. If, like, just hypothetically, right, if you were to say, like, if you like the way that she says that, right, and I'm not saying you do or not, but just hypothetically, right, that is a way. Now it's very readily, as soon as I played it, it was already loaded to the timestamp, 34 seconds or whatever it is. And as soon as she said map, I was like, yeah, she's from the north. Like immediately, I knew exactly where she was from. And hypothetically, if you wanted to say the like that, you could. You're going to have a bit of a northern accent, and people are going to notice that. But it would still be natural. right? It's still an American accent. Just like there's actually I'll have to find the video if you want to watch it. But I saw this video a while ago of this guy from China, like straight up from China, like 100% speaks. I think I remember if it was Mandarin or Cantonese. I think it might have been Cantonese, but he's from China, right? He didn't speak any English, unless I am mixing up some details. But I'm pretty sure he didn't speak any English. He came to the United States. He wanted to be a cowboy. He wanted to live in the South and work on a ranch and do all this stuff. And he learned English and he learned the Southern accent because that's what was around him. And he speaks with a flawless Southern accent. Like I would assume that he's from the South. You know, he's a Chinese cowboy. He just looks Asian. He sounds exactly like a white American from the South, but he's this Chinese guy dressed as a cowboy. Um, and that's perfectly fine. That's the accent he wanted. Uh, and it's not neutral, but he mastered it, as far as I could tell. And that's perfectly fine too. So you can always pick and choose, right? When you're learning your accent, you can choose details. It just depends on the effect you want. If you don't mind sounding like maybe you're from the north, and the from like that she says is a little easier, learn it. You know, there's nothing saying you can't. But if you don't want that sound, you don't want people to think like, oh, you're from the north. You want more of that sort of like neutral, general to Western type sound. Then you don't want to do that, right? So it depends on what you want, and what you're okay with doing. Um, just like me in Spanish, the the double L and Y, they're sometimes they're a little bit different depending on the country we're talking about, but they're generally the same sound. It's just two ways to spell the same thing. And some countries pronounce it like a y, some countries pronounce it like a sh. I think in Argentina only they pronounce it like a sh and sh. Some countries pronounce it more like a j sound. So like me llamo, me llamo, me llamo. All of them are perfectly fine and natural things. But like, for example, apparently a lot of people don't like Argentina. Like in the Spanish speaking world, apparently there's something about Argentinians that other Spanish speakers don't like. Um, and so the sh, like la playa, the beach, la playa, playa. Some people don't want to learn that because if they go speak to some other Spanish speaker, they're going to be like, "Oh, I don't like you because you sound like you're from Argentina," which I don't care. I think it's the most beautiful Spanish accent there is, from Argentina. But the point is that with that particular sound, I don't do the sh usually, but I'll say y or j. It doesn't matter. Sometimes I'll say me llamo, sometimes I'll say me llamo, sometimes I'll go in between. I'll say me llamo. I'll do sort of like a bridge in between them where it's just blurred together, and that's perfectly fine. It's absolutely perfectly fine because I'm cool with that. For that particular detail, because they're all technically natural and it doesn't really matter. Okay, so David seems to have trouble with a vowel fourth. I suppose so. I thought it was okay, but there seems to be something off about it, and I really don't know. But different people have told me different things, so I'm just utterly confused. Well, stop listening to other people. Just listen to me. You know? No. That's one of the things because where are these different people coming from? If you ask somebody who comes from the East Coast, somebody who comes from the South, somebody who comes from the West, they're going to tell you completely different things, right? And you're trying to match what this person said, what this person said, what this person said, and you don't know which way to go, right? That's why when you're learning pronunciation, you want to stay within one accent, and then ideally between Western American and General American, again, because there's so few differences, it's okay to kind of have teachers from both. Just be aware of if you're using the cot merger to just ignore when they tell you to say all. But ideally, like if you're learning from me and you're learning, Western American plus with my hacks that I give you to make it even easier, ideally, you would like just learn from me. Now, obviously, I'm not saying just learn from me and ignore other teachers because that would be stupid. Like number one, you can do whatever you want, and number two, like I have no right to say like, oh, I'm the teacher, So, but if you can focus on Western American sources, if you're trying to learn, Western specifically, like with the cot merger and everything, you're going to get that much more reinforcement. And if you talk to people from the Western United States, as long as they're not from certain regions, like say San Francisco or Portland or Seattle, where they do have a little bit of regional difference. Most people from the West are going to tell you the exact same thing. Where in general American, depending on the sound, will mostly tell you the same thing. But obviously, if you're using the cot merger and you speak to somebody from Missouri and they don't have the cot merger and they say, oh, there sounds like it's something a little bit off, it might be because you're saying ah instead of all when they would say all. So, and that's perfectly fine. That doesn't matter. So you have to kind of be aware of that if you depending on who you're talking to. And I'm making it sound more complicated than it is. It really doesn't have to be that difficult. Just try to be consistent with your sources, and you can avoid a lot of confusion with that. How about we connect on Skype, David, and help each other out? This is my Skype ID. Why not? Though I'm starting to think I just developed certain habits, and now I have trouble getting rid of them. Getting rid of them, not rid of them. Yes. So ID, sure. Maybe just for 5-10 minutes we can chit chat. You say the same. Okay. Good. So you guys are chatting amongst yourself as I'm going on, just blabbering away. Yeah. So, and I think that would be good. If you guys want to get together and practice a little bit, especially if you're both learning from me as well, then that's even better. I feel like I have like a school now. I mean, obviously, I'm sure you guys also watch videos from other teachers, but it's like you're actually like directly connecting. It's like you're in a class. It's like that's awesome. It's part of the community vibe. That's good. But yeah, we'll definitely have a Skype session. We'll have to make sure Elmi is still on board. If Elmi can't make it for some reason, or he's not interested anymore, then I have another person that I can ask, but he might be busy. So anyway, as far as certain habits go, that's one of the things. This is why feedback can be so important. The more talent you have, the less feedback you need. But obviously, like not everybody has talent, and talent isn't required. It just makes things easier. So there is fossilization in grammar and in pronunciation, right? Fossilization meaning where you solidify mistakes because you repeat them so many times, and that's okay. In terms of, well, it's not completely avoidable. I don't think, like, maybe it depends on, I guess, what you do, but for most people and with most of the way that they're probably taught at first in the horrible way that schools teach, it's kind of unavoidable that you're either grammar or pronunciation, you're gonna have some mistakes. So that's one reason why I say when you start a language, obviously, like I'm talking to you guys, you already you speak English to a certain degree, and here we are. But when you're learning a language, the first thing you should do is you should go straight to the pronunciation. You should pick a particular dialect or accent that you like, and you should just focus on that. Train your ears, train your mouth. Spend 2 weeks to a month just doing that. That's my approach. So you can have that down first because that's your physical mechanics, and then every time you try to say a word, or either in isolation or in a conversation, you're reinforcing the patterns that you built or did not build in that initial period. So if you skip that, you're guaranteed to have fossilized pronunciation mistakes. But the thing about fossilization, right? It sounds all big and scary and bad. Oh no, it's like, they're hard like fossils. Okay, well, yeah, it takes extra work to fix them because you've already built one neural pathway. And it's unfortunate, but the brain is plastic. And you can definitely unlearn it. It's harder than learning it right the first time, but it is fixable. So it really comes down to how much work are you willing to put in? How close do you want to sound? If you say a lot and perfect, then you're going to have a lot of work, um, especially to fix the fossilization. It is possible. So, yeah. The reason I support you, Josh, is because you listen to your students and try to understand where they are coming from. I know that was sent to like probably like 5 minutes ago, but thanks a lot for that. It's like I'm actually not listening. I was just talking. But yeah, yeah. Uh, well, I mean, I don't see why I wouldn't. Like that's the first thing. Whether you're teaching somebody or you're, debating somebody or whatever, the first step is figure out what's the issue, figure out where the issue is coming from, and then attack that. Because otherwise, you're kind of just wasting time. You're spinning your wheels. And that doesn't mean I'm perfect. I mean, like, I get in arguments with people and I forget that sometimes. But when it comes to teaching, I know sound is the fundamental unit of spoken language. And that's one reason why I've talked about sound so much on this channel so far and why I'm making the pronunciation course before anything else, because sound is the foundation of spoken language. Like that's where you start. That's where you have to get it. And I know that it's the physical mechanics. So because I like pronunciation and because I worked with so many students, it's easy for me to hear what you're doing, picture it, reproduce it in my mouth, and then tell you what to change. That's my superpower. So lucky me. Um, but yeah, well, I'm glad that you support me for those reasons. I thought you just supported me because I'm so dashingly handsome, but maybe that's just me. I don't know. It's been 3.5 hours, and here it is going to 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock. So, and my throat's starting to hurt too. Provided that I did not forget any details or failed to answer any questions, as long as nobody has any other questions or comments or whatnot to say, then I think we're pretty much done for today. Sedent's done. Yeah, Dave, and I would say that if you're having some trouble with the like the ah or the ah, at least your ah, because I heard your ah before. It's kind of like you're having the same problem sedent is with the eh. It's like technically it's the sound. It's just not the right quality, right? You don't have the English quality of the sound. Um, so you guys are kind of experiencing the same thing, just for different sounds, different positions. How about same time next week? We could. I try to switch it up every week because different people are from different places. But I mean, same time 2 weeks in a row is okay. I don't think that'll be a big deal. Let's see. I started at what 3:30. Yeah, we could do it again. I would say maybe push it back a half hour, like 3 o'clock. That sounds a little bit better. Let's get a little bit earlier. So yeah, next week we'll do 3 o'clock. So half hour earlier than the one that started. So the one that started. I don't speak English, guys. I just teach it. I have no idea what I'm saying. Oh, for Skype. Wait. Okay, hold on. Two things here. By the way, with the actor from Parasite, I don't know what Parasite is. I guess I'm gonna get more skulls for that. But I have no idea what Parasite is. I don't think I've. Oh wait, is that the Korean film? I think I've heard of that. It was like a really big popular film. I told you guys I took the Myers-Briggs personality test like multiple times, and the lowest that I scored on the introverted scale was like 95%. One time I took it and I got 98%. So for some reason I like languages and I like learning things and I like humanity, but I don't generally want to interact with the world and I tend to not to hear about things that everybody knows about. So sorry. Jeez. It's a Korean film, yeah. Um, yeah, one of my other students, one of my students from Korea was telling me about that a while ago. Um, that sounds vaguely familiar. I think, yeah, I wanted to watch that. I just never got around to it. So I guess I'll have to watch it. Now I have a reason to watch it. I have to give you feedback on how he sounds. Okay, so for Skype, yeah, the Skype meetup. The so what do you mean same time next week? Like, I'm so confused. Like, do a Skype meetup instead of the live stream? Because that's not what I was thinking. But yeah, because we do have to coordinate the time for the Skype meetup, of course. And you don't like the taxi driver. Well, I wouldn't say I don't like it. I haven't watched it. Whatever suits you. Okay, so Seeded is open for any time for Skype. It seems Elmi isn't here, so we're gonna have to bring him into the coordination as well. You can check the link to the video and let me know later. I didn't get a link. If this was a new link after the last link you said, then I don't have the link. Have a good night. Well, yes, that would be proper at 7 o'clock. Yeah, we'll figure out the details for the Skype meeting on Patreon. So I'll post a message there out to everybody, and we'll discuss the details in the comments for that post. Not sure what time of day is in your neck of the woods. It is 7 p.m., which I guess in the rest of the world would be 19 o'clock. I don't even know. So, okay, anyway, nothing else, people? We good? I think we good. Yeah, we good. That's a very informal speech. So, okay, well, good night, good morning, good afternoon to the world. And next live stream, I guess we'll figure out when we figure out the Skype meeting. And bye bye. I will see you all next time.